I used to be a janitor for a high school. It was a job that I only had for about a year, and this was back in 2019. The job was not too bad, but I moved on to other things later. For the most part, when I worked as a janitor, I would work overnights in the high school and typically was all by myself. I would start at 9 o'clock at night and get off at 5 o'clock in the morning. The high school was large, but not so big that I couldn't manage it. With all that time and the whole place to myself, I could clean everything that I was supposed to. A few times, due to events on the school campus, there were some people there around the time I started, but they would usually be gone within an hour or two. I would do the things that you would expect: mop floors, vacuum, sweep, and maintain the bathrooms. Not every room in the school required attention daily, so it's not like I was cleaning every single classroom every night. I would even have some downtime where I would just go on my phone or whatever. It was honestly a decent job. The only downside was that I had to be nocturnal and work overnights and sleep during the day. The other downside was that I was all by myself all night in a school, which sometimes felt sort of creepy. Most of the lights would be off, and a lot of them were motion-detected lights, so they would turn on when I went near them. One night, I was working at a random hallway cleaning the floors. It was probably about midnight or 1 a.m. I remember that I thought I heard footsteps coming from not that far away. I looked over, but saw nothing. Now, the footsteps might not have been in my sight and come from around the corner. I walked over, wondering who was in here. As far as I knew, I was all by myself, like always. When I made it to the end of the hallway, I looked around, but saw nothing. I went back over to where I had been and continued work. Maybe I had just imagined it. I wasn't 100% sure because it hadn't been very loud. But probably 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps again. This time, I knew I was hearing it. I looked to the end of the hallway, and when I did, saw a man walking by. I only saw him for a couple of seconds because he walked past the hall to another. He was only visible for a short amount of time. I could tell that it was a man though, and seemingly an adult. But beyond that, I couldn't really tell any details because he was kind of far away. I started walking over and called out, asking who was there. Nobody was supposed to be in the school at this time. Nobody answered me when I called out though. When I got to the end of the hallway and looked, he was gone. There were other hallways that he could have gone down though. I walked a little ways farther looking around and asking if anybody was there. But I saw no one and didn't hear anything either. After that, I wasn't really sure what to do. I just ended up going back to work where I had been. Some time went by, and eventually I moved into another hallway. Probably 3 hours or so after the last time I saw the guy, something else happened. This time, I was facing the end of the hallway, and out of nowhere, I heard this noise behind me. I couldn't really tell what it was. I turned around and looked back, and saw a basketball rolling right in my direction. It went past me and hit a locker. When I looked up to where it had been rolling from, I didn't see anybody. I suspected that whoever was in the building stood at the end of the hallway that I was in and rolled the ball towards me. Then they moved away out of my sight, but why they did it, I had no idea. I picked up the ball and walked to the end of the hallway to where it had been rolled from. I called out once more, asking if anybody was there. Still, nobody answered me. I stood there in silence, looking around for like 5 minutes. I didn't see or hear anything at all. Somebody was messing with me, but I didn't know why. I mean, they weren't even supposed to be here in the first place. Once more, I went back to work. From that point on, I wasn't bothered again for the rest of my shift that day. Just before I was done, I decided to walk all around the school to look for the person. I went into every wing and hallway and asked if anybody was there in each one. I even checked all of the bathrooms, but nobody ever answered me, and I didn't see anyone either. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I got off, and another janitor got there. I told him about what had happened and asked him to keep an eye out for the guy. Then I left the school and drove home. During this time, I was living in a small house by myself, about 10 minutes away from the school. I got back, and my typical routine was to go to bed and get some sleep. It was strange to go to sleep at like 6 a.m., but I got used to it. So on this day, It was probably 5 minutes after I got back home and I was in my kitchen. That's when I heard a knock on my front door. Instantly, I was confused. I walked over to the living room and looked out of the front window. Nobody was there. Just off in the distance, I saw a guy walking down the street. I saw him for just a second or two before he went out of my sight. It looked like the same guy who had been inside the school. I was so creeped out. I didn't fall asleep for hours. But luckily, the man never returned. And after that day, nothing like that happened in the school ever again either. I still wonder though, who he was and what he was doing. One time, I was working in an office building. It was a pretty standard building with several floors and cubicles and stuff. The building was empty overnights as far as I knew, but I was only supposed to be working on the first floor. I was supposed to be cleaning the office area and vacuum the large amount of carpet that they had on that level, as well as cleaning some other things. This story takes place on probably my second week working there. To that point, it had been very easy. I was all by myself each night, and things were going smooth. I got my work done in plenty of time typically most nights. One random night though, it was 2 a.m. and I was changing one of the trash cans. Out of nowhere, I heard the sound of glass breaking. I had no idea what was going on for a few seconds. It was just so unexpected that my brain was trying to make sense of it. Soon though, I realized the obvious, that somebody must have broken in. That's when I realized that I might be in danger. The glass breaking sound came from a ways away. There were lots of cubicles and dividers and stuff, so whoever broke in was out of my sight. I wasn't sure what to do, so I got on the ground and crawled to a cubicle. I went inside, being as quiet as I could, and then I hid underneath a desk. What I heard then was footsteps moving a ways away, but inside. I obviously didn't know who had seemingly broken into the office building or why. The footsteps started moving closer to me. I was paranoid that they somehow knew I was in here or something. They were still a long ways away and seemed to slow down a little. It was at that moment when I finally had the thought to call the police, but it was so quiet in there other than the person walking that I was afraid to. If I so much as moved a muscle, I was scared the person would hear me. I was literally sitting there completely still and almost holding my breath. Whoever was in there seemed to stop and was still a ways away. I didn't hear much, but could tell that they were staying in the same area. This went on for about 2 or 3 minutes if I had to guess. Then they started to walk again and walk closer to me. For this time, they probably moved to within about 30 feet of me, and I got very nervous. I was just thinking that they might suddenly look under the desk. They stopped though, and I couldn't tell what they were doing. At that point, I really badly wanted to call the police. I just couldn't bring myself to do it though. I was convinced that if I moved at all to get my phone, the person would hear it. I reached for my pocket, but then stopped. It seemed like I was making too much noise. Then I just froze and held my breath, trying not to make a sound at all. The person remained where they were, doing who knows what. They stayed in that area for what felt like forever. I honestly don't know exactly how long it was. Maybe 5 minutes at most, but that's a long time for the situation that I was in. Finally, I heard them walking back in the direction that they came from. I continued to not move a muscle. They went pretty far away, and then I stopped hearing them at all. I wasn't sure if they had left or what. I waited for probably 5 more minutes without hearing them at all. That's when I finally determined that they must have left. I finally grabbed my phone and called the police. Still, I wasn't 100% sure that they were gone, so I spoke as quietly as I could. I was told that the police were on the way, and I remained hidden underneath the desk. In the time that I was waiting, I didn't hear any more noises at all. I was able to leave the area underneath the desk and was very sure that the person had gone. When I looked around, everything seemed to be in place. The police arrived next, and I told them what happened. One of the windows a ways away was in fact broken, but I had no clue if anything was stolen or not, because I didn't know everything that the office building had. Nothing that I was aware of was in any different place than before. After that, I was sent home because the police were going to stay there and do more investigating. I returned to work there several nights later to continue with my job. For the rest of the time that I worked there, I was nervous that something like that would happen again, but luckily there were no more break-ins. I'm not sure who exactly broke in that one night, and I never heard that much more about it. For a while, I worked as a janitor at a university. The college was about average sized, and there were several different buildings on campus. There were a few other janitors, and we would all have certain buildings that we were assigned to clean. That would change as well, so basically I would just do as I was told. When I worked, it would mostly be the afternoon into the night. I would get off at like 10 or 11 p.m. oftentimes. One night, I was working in one of the buildings that had classrooms in it. It was at the west end of campus, sort of on the edge. I got inside the building in the evening, after all the classes for the day were completed. There were still a few students around studying and such, but not very many. As the night went on, there would be less and less. Most of the time, things were very similar from one building to the other. I started cleaning some of the classrooms, and it would take me a while. By probably 9 o'clock at night, there was nobody there at all. I had cleaned quite a bit, and I was just going to finish in the building and then be done. I had about 2 classrooms left. Now, the building had several different hallways, lounge areas for studying, and then offices. I was making my way down one hallway when I heard footsteps up ahead in the distance. They were going to the direction of the classrooms I was going to be cleaning, and I was walking towards them. As I did, I saw a man walk into my view from around the hallway. Then he kept going. Soon he went out of my sight. I didn't think too much of it because he was a long ways ahead of me, and I assumed that he was just a student. It was unusual for people to be here so late, but he was probably just doing some late night studying. So I kept going to the classroom that I was going to work in, and I arrived about a minute or two later. When I opened the door and went inside, the lights were off. After turning them on, the room appeared to be completely empty. I had my cleaning cart with me with lots of supplies. I began taking some things and was going to start working. Out of nowhere, though, I heard a noise coming from my left. I looked over and saw that there was a man running towards me at full speed. It was the guy that I had seen just minutes earlier, and now he was aggressively charging me. I barely had any time to react. The only thing that I was able to do was move back and try to get to the door. As I was doing this, the man reached me. I felt him grabbing at my arm, and then he hit my back a little as I was moving away. Then he crashed into my cleaning cart, knocking it over, and the man fell over as well. I was able to get away from him and leave the classroom, but I could see that he was getting up to chase after me. I ran down the hallway and found a door that was a bathroom. I got inside quickly and then locked it. The man got there about 10 seconds later. Looking back, I should have tried to leave the building, but I wasn't very fast and thought that the man might catch me if I left. He tried opening the locked door and then started banging on it. Luckily, I had my cell phone on me and I dialed 911. As I got on the phone with the police, the man was still ruthlessly banging on the door. I didn't know what on earth his problem was. He continued to try to get in the door, and I didn't say anything at all. I was worried that the door would break, even though it was pretty strong. It seemed to be holding up pretty well, though. The man did not let up and continued. The more he hit it, the more the door seemed to shake. But I soon heard the sound of other people in the building, and I knew that it was the police. Before I knew it, they reached the man and stopped him from trying to get in. They left the building with him, and I came out to see several police officers standing around. I found out that the guy wasn't even a student at the university. I still don't know why he tried to attack me and then chased after me. I don't know what his problem was. Clearly, he was dangerous. He must have hidden the classroom, but I don't think he knew that I would go in there. Maybe he was mad at me for entering the room. I still don't know. But after that, I never had any experiences like that. I worked at that school for about another year, then I moved on. That was the most memorable moment from my time there. This is something that took place back when I was about 12 years old. During this time, I lived with my parents and siblings in a neighborhood with lots of houses in it. However, not every house looked the same, and there were many different sized yards. I remember that there was this one house a ways down my street that was abandoned. I didn't know the story on it, but I know that one of my friends lived 2 doors down from it. This house had a bigger yard, and there were lots of trees on the property as well. So many, in fact, that you could barely even see the house from the street. It had been abandoned for several years, and I honestly don't know why. I had a few friends that lived in the neighborhood, and I went to school with them and stuff. One evening, I was hanging out with the friend who lived by the abandoned house. His name was Kyler. It was approaching sunset, and I was over in his yard. I don't remember how, but we got to talking about the abandoned house. I was curious about it, because I didn't know anything other than that it was abandoned. Kyler said that we should go over and look at it, so we walked along the sidewalk in front of his house and past the next door neighbors. Then we were standing in front of the abandoned house. There was a gate that was a little bit open and really rusty. The front yard was overgrown with long grass and lots of trees that needed trimming. I remember that Kyler just started walking up in the yard. I followed him, and then he walked past the gate. At that point, I asked him if we were allowed to go back here. He said, "Yeah, the property's abandoned, so who cares?" Then he claimed that he had been in the yard several times before. He started showing me the house and talking about it. We went all the way around it and into the backyard. There, the grass was also overgrown, but there were patches of dirt as well. Then we noticed that a back door to the house was open a little bit. Kyler and I walked over to it. I think that we were both pretty curious as to why the door was open. We both knew 100% that the house was abandoned. Kyler said that the door was not open the last time he was back there. I asked him if he had ever seen the inside of the house before, and he said no. At that point, we both decided to go in. Kyler opened the door just enough for us both to enter. Once we were inside, we saw that all the lights appeared to be off. It was getting dark out now, so the visibility wasn't the greatest. I could tell, though, that there really wasn't much of anything inside the house at all. We were in what was maybe the dining room or living room. I saw a kitchen area to the left. We both walked in farther and saw that there were a few pieces of old furniture here and there, but really not much. I remember seeing a staircase going up, but we walked past it and went towards this hallway. I had a bad feeling about the whole thing, and I didn't really want to be there. To me, we had seen enough and probably should be going. But Kyler continued to walk through the house and went down the hallway into what I think was a bedroom. I remember that I stayed back a little bit. I was still in the hallway when Kyler walked inside of the bedroom. At that point, though, I suddenly heard these footsteps. It sounded like somebody was actually upstairs. I listened close and realized that somebody was definitely coming down the staircase. I quickly ran over into the room that Kyler was in. This appeared to be mostly empty as well. I told Kyler that I heard somebody coming down the stairs. At first, he didn't believe me and thought that I was just messing with him. But a moment later, we both heard the footsteps arriving at the bottom of the stairs. I went over and quietly closed the door to the room that we were inside of. We heard the person begin to walk around. The footsteps got slightly closer to us. My heart was beating like crazy, and I was literally sweating. The footsteps did not enter the hallway, though. Instead, they headed to the front side of the house. When this happened, Kyler and I knew that we needed to get out of there. We felt that whoever was in there probably heard us, and they were now looking for us. I opened the door, and then we both sprinted out of the hallway into the back door of the house. Luckily, it was still open how we left it. Neither of us bothered to look back where the person had walked. When I was going out the door, though, I did hear footsteps approaching, but they were still a distance away. We both left the house, and then fled on foot around the house and back out onto the sidewalk. Then we both went back to Kyler's house. Whoever had been inside of the house did not leave or follow us. After that night, we never went back there again. I'm not sure who was in there. That was one of the scariest moments of my life, though. This is something that took place years ago, when I think I was about 19. During this time, I lived with my parents in the neighborhood that I grew up in. I was working only about a mile away from home at a store. It was a part-time job, but I remember that at one point, my car broke down and had to be fixed. I would be without it for a few days, but still had to work. During this time, I walked the mile distance to work, which was really not too bad. It was a little bit different route than I would take while driving though. So the first day that I was walking to work, I remember I passed by this old convenience store in town. The store was now abandoned and had been for several years. I went there a couple of times when I was really young, and seeing it brought back a lot of memories, but I walked right past it to work. However, when I got off work and I was walking home afterwards, I passed by the store again. This time, I was curious and I walked closer. There was a small empty parking lot in front and to the side of the store. The store was very small, and it was basically like a convenience store that you would see with a gas station, except there were never any gas pumps at this one. I walked up to the front and looked inside one of the windows. Inside, the lights were off, but things looked like they hadn't been touched in years. There was still a lot of things inside the store. It was sort of messy and looked really strange to see. It was interesting to me though, and I stood at the window for maybe 5 minutes. As I was looking around, I suddenly saw a man come out from behind one of the aisles inside. This was really strange, because the building was abandoned. The man looked right at me, and I quickly turned and walked away. I kept going down the sidewalk back home. It was really creepy to see a person inside there. The man did not appear to be any kind of construction worker or anything like that. I went the rest of the way back home, and the next day when I walked to work, I went past the store again. But that night, I got off a little bit later than usual. I was walking right by the store again on my way home. This time, I got curious once more, and I stopped to look in the window. It was much darker now with it being nighttime. When I was looking though, once more a man appeared from behind an aisle, this time much quicker than the last time. This guy started walking towards me at the window, and I turned and walked away again. I left the parking lot and then went back onto the sidewalk. Then I crossed a nearby street and went onto another sidewalk. But it was about at that point where I heard footsteps behind me. The sidewalk that I was on was very quiet, and nobody else would ever really walk on it. So this was strange. I turned around and looked, and saw the guy who had been inside of the convenience store. He was walking a pretty long ways back, but appeared to be walking after me. It made me a little bit nervous, but I kept going home. I probably had about 10 minutes left of walking to get there. Most of it was straight, but I would turn several more times. The first turn that I made, I was positive that the guy would keep going straight, but he didn't. He turned with me, and that made me a lot more nervous that he actually was following me. He wasn't really gaining on me at all though, so I started to walk faster. The next turn, I didn't see him for a while after I had made it around, and I actually thought that he was gone. But then I saw him come around the corner and continue to follow me. By this point, I didn't have a whole lot farther to go. I kept walking, and soon my house was in sight. I looked back, and the guy was still there following me. At that point, I made a run for it, and it's probably something that I shouldn't have done. I started sprinting, but at the time that I did, for some reason, I looked behind me. The man also started to sprint. I ran for my house, and luckily it wasn't that far away. I arrived and struggled to unlock the door, but eventually I got it open and went inside. I looked out of the front window and saw the guy now walking down the sidewalk. He did not come into our yard, but stopped and was just kind of standing there on the sidewalk in front. He was not looking at me, and he wasn't even looking at our house, but he was just standing in front of it, looking down the street. Then, after about a minute, I saw him turn around and walk back. I don't know what he was doing. He was probably mad at me for looking inside of the store, but I really didn't mean anything bad by it. I was just curious. After that, I walked a different route to and from work until I got my car back. I'm not sure when it changed, but today, the convenience store is a newer one. This happened back when I was a kid. I think I was maybe 8 or 10 years old. I I lived in a neighborhood that had a cul-de-sac on it. There were several kids in the neighborhood that I was friends with, and we would all hang out. So one night, I was with some friends and we were playing several games in the street. We started playing hide and go seek, and we basically had the entire cul-de-sac to ourselves. My friends and I lived in almost every house on the cul-de-sac, except maybe 2 or 3 of them. One house though, the one at the very end, was abandoned. Everybody knew that, but not many people knew why. It was an old house, and I really couldn't remember the last time anybody did live there. So I remember that one of my friends stood in the street and began counting. We all started running away, scattering to find our hiding spots. I remember that I suddenly got this idea to hide behind the abandoned house. I figured nobody lived there, so no one would be mad that I went in their yard, and I also thought that my friend would never think to look there. I felt like I had almost found a loophole in the game and would easily win for sure. So I went onto the property and then into the backyard. Then I crouched down behind one corner of the house. The backyard to this property seemed to go back kind of far. There appeared to be a woods at the end of the yard that went on for who knows how long. Several minutes went by, and I knew that my friend was looking for everyone. I couldn't hear much from where I was, but I did hear a little bit of chatter from some of my friends off in the distance. As time went on, I felt more and more confident that I wouldn't be found and would win the game. I was just waiting to hear them say that everyone had been found except for me. So when I was just sitting behind the house back there, I casually turned around. When I did, I saw this man standing in front of the woods. He was staring right at me. The guy was somewhat big, and I couldn't tell many details about him other than that. It was really dark out. I had no idea who he was, and it really creeped me out. As soon as I saw him, I got up and ran back around the house. I didn't care about hide and seek anymore. After making it around the house and down the driveway, I saw a couple of my friends in the street. They saw me running and then looked behind me. The man had come out around the house and was standing sort of at the side of it. When we all saw him, I think everybody got really freaked out and just scattered. At that point, we all went running back to our houses and then went inside. Everybody knew that that property was abandoned, so seeing a random man walk out from the side of it meant it was time to go inside. After we all went back to our houses, it was already getting late, and we wouldn't be able to stay out for much longer anyways. So none of us went back out, and I was really creeped out by seeing the guy. I really never expected it. However, I didn't tell my parents or anything. That night, I don't remember much else until I went to bed. My bedroom was at the back side of the house, and I had a window out to the backyard. I remember waking up sometime in the middle of the night. The first thing I noticed was that there was a knocking sound from my bedroom window, and that must have been what woke me up. I looked up and saw a man standing there, looking in. He was the same guy that I saw in the backyard of the abandoned house. The guy was just staring at me on the other side of the window. I got up and ran out of my room to my parents' bedroom next door. I started banging on their door like crazy until they got up. When we returned to my bedroom, the man was gone. I remember that my dad went outside and looked around the property, but he couldn't find him. After coming back inside, my parents called the police. They arrived several minutes later, and I don't really remember much after that, but I know that the next day, I told one of my friends about it. She said that she also saw a man at her window the previous night. He went away pretty quickly though. This guy must have went to at least 2 of our houses. After that though, nobody in our neighborhood saw him again. It still gives me the creeps to think about it to this day. This happened back in 1996. I was driving home from work one night. It was kind of late at night, and I lived in a house that was roughly 20 minutes away. So I remember that after leaving work, I was driving down the road and this car came up behind me. It was still pretty early on in the drive. However, I didn't suspect the car to be following me until maybe 5 minutes after this, when I turned 2 more times. The car remained with me. I'm not sure when this car started following me, if it was right when I left work or afterwards. However, I did not recognize the vehicle, and I didn't know who this could be. None of my coworkers lived by my house. This car was a white sedan, and it just looked pretty average for the most part. I really couldn't tell who was driving. I kept going back home, and I just hoped that the car would stop following me at some point. At first, I was thinking that this had to be a mistake. Maybe the driver of the car thought that I was somebody else, or maybe there was a chance that they weren't actually following me. By the time I had made it to my street, though, the car was still there, and my street was generally pretty quiet. So when I got there, I really didn't know what else to do, so I drove to my house. My plan was to go into the driveway and then go inside and hope that nobody chased after me or anything. But when I reached my house, before going in the driveway, I slowed down significantly. When I did, the car behind me got right up really close. It became pretty obvious that they were likely going to pull into my driveway after me, so then I just stopped in the road. I didn't think that it would be a good idea to go into my driveway anymore. As soon as my car stopped, I saw in my rearview mirror multiple doors to the car behind me opening. It looked to be just about every door except for the driver's. 3 men then got out of the car, and all of them at once started walking in my direction. As soon as I saw this, my instant reaction was to drive away. I hit the gas and started moving. The men were able to just about reach my car, but then they stopped when I was moving away fast enough. After that, the car behind me started to move forward towards me, but then it quickly stopped. Then the men raced over and started getting back inside of the car. I tried to use this to my advantage and drive as quickly as I could to the end of the street. By the time I reached the end, though, I could see the car catching back up with me, and because there was really nobody else out on the road, it would be difficult to lose this guy. So I knew that I couldn't go back to my house at this point, and I decided to just drive around. I really didn't know what to do or where to go. It was late at night, and all of my family and friends were probably asleep. And remember, this was '96, so I didn't have a cell phone. So I went back out onto another road with this car right behind me. I was able to soon get onto a nearby busier road, but there was still nobody else out driving. The car with at least 4 men in it was staying right behind me. I drove down this road for probably another 10 minutes. Then I saw something that caught my eye. There was a gas station up ahead that appeared to be open, and not only that, but there were what looked like 2 cars getting gas. I knew that I had to go there, and I pulled off the road, and then there was a quieter one before the gas station. The car behind me followed onto the quieter road, but when I pulled into the gas station, the car behind me did not. I went right behind another car that was getting gas. Then I got out and looked around for where the car that had been following me went. I saw that the car turned its lights off and was parked on the side of the quiet road that the gas station was on. I realized that they were probably waiting for me to leave. I was happy to see that none of them were getting out of the car though, so I went inside of the gas station. Then I went to the employee behind the counter and I asked him to call the police. After that, I waited inside for them to arrive. But sometime between when I went inside the gas station to when the police got there, the car left. It was maybe 5 to 10 minutes of a wait. When they got there though, I went outside and saw that the car was gone. I told the police what had happened. There wasn't much that could be done though. After the police left, I was able to drive back home and luckily didn't see the car again. I've always wondered why those guys were following me. I didn't recognize any of them, and I don't know what they could have possibly wanted. I'm really glad that they didn't catch me though. This happened a couple of years ago when I was on a road trip. I was traveling across about 5 states, so it was a bit of a long drive. I found myself traveling pretty late one night in almost the middle of nowhere. I was sort of winging it, and I would usually drive about as far as I could each day. Then at night when I got really tired, I would just stop in the next town and find a hotel. I would ask if they had any rooms, and then I would get one and sleep for the night. So anyways, it was pretty late, but I wasn't too tired yet. I wasn't really near any cities either, and after some time, I was really thirsty, so I saw a rest stop up ahead. I took the exit from the highway and I pulled in. The rest stop was right off the highway, and it was a smaller one. There was just 1 row of parking spaces, and maybe 2 or 3 other cars were there when I arrived. So I parked, got out, and went inside of this little building. After getting something to drink, I left the building. Just as I did, I saw this car pulling into a parking space pretty close to where my car was. I thought nothing of it, and I walked to my vehicle. Then I got inside and started up my car. The car parked just a few spaces away from mine was running and the driver was still inside. As soon as I started backing up, I noticed the car backing up as well. I began driving away, with the car now behind me. I did think that was a little bit odd, with it leaving literally right after me. Plus, it didn't seem like the driver had even got out to go into the rest stop, because I knew the car wasn't there when I got there. I got back onto the highway, which was pretty quiet by now with it being late. The car drove right behind me on the road. It didn't take me long at all to wonder if this guy was intentionally following me. So to put it to the test, I started driving pretty slow. I think I was going at least 5 miles per hour under the speed limit. The car that was driving behind me did not bother to pass, but instead kept going behind me. I went down the highway for about 20 or 30 minutes. The entire time, the car stayed right on my tail. I was really surprised by this. I couldn't think of any reason as to why somebody would want to follow me. I got tired of it and was still basically in the middle of nowhere. So when I saw another sign for a rest stop, I decided to go to this one as well. I slowed down and took the exit. This one was much like the one that I had been to earlier. After going off the highway, the car followed me, which is what I was afraid of. Then I didn't bother to stop at all. I drove right through the rest area and then went back onto the highway. The car that was following me did the exact same thing. After that, I didn't really know what else to do. I felt like any place that I went, the car would follow me. So for a while, I just kept going down the highway. I probably went for another 20 minutes with the guy behind me for the entire time. Then, finally, the idea came to me to drive to a police station. I remembered it from somewhere, that that's what you're supposed to do when you're being followed. Except I was in the middle of nowhere. I took out my phone and quickly searched for a police station. Thankfully, I had service. There was a police station a little ways up the road and off the highway. I put in the directions and then followed them. Within a few minutes, I took an exit from the highway. The car behind me did the same. Then I drove on this quieter road for a short time and then arrived in a small town. And finally, there was a police station. I went into the parking lot and the car started to drive in after me. That made me worried. But then, in one motion, the car turned around completely, making a U-turn. Then it left the parking lot and went back onto the road. I decided to go into the police station and just report what had happened. After that, I looked for a hotel. It was very late, and I was able to find one in the same city. After that, I never saw the car again. I was able to continue with my road trip. However, I will always wonder who that was that was following me and why they were doing it. This happened just last year. I was going to be meeting up with a friend in the city. I lived almost 10 minutes away from downtown, which is where I was going. So I left my apartment and started driving on the road. My apartment was on this really quiet street, and I remember that as I was driving there was a car behind me. I noticed it because the car was red, so it stood out a little bit. Of course, I didn't think that I was being followed at first. I went on my way to the city, and I wasn't even looking behind me for most of the way. But when I left the highway to take an exit for downtown, I noticed that the same red car was behind me. I thought that it was strange, but maybe just a coincidence. After making it into the city, I accidentally made a wrong turn. Driving in downtown can be very confusing. Even though I had the directions on my phone, I would still make mistakes in the city sometimes. So I had to go around and head back. I did notice that the red car behind me did the exact same thing, and that seemed really suspicious. So now I was worried that this car was following me, but I didn't know why. I was also trying to drive in the city, which was hard enough. I had to go to the end of the street and then turn. When I did, the red car did as well. I wasn't so sure if I wanted to stop and park and get out of my car if somebody was following me, but then I got lucky, or so I thought. The street that I came onto was pretty busy with a lot of other cars. It was almost stop-and-go traffic. I was able to sort of get away from the red car because there were so many others. I may have cut somebody off and changed lanes a little bit much, but soon I got ahead of the red car. There were several cars in between us, and I was feeling better about it. Then I had to make another turn, and I didn't see the red car behind me anymore. Moments later, I arrived at where I was parking. I was able to find a few open spaces on the side of the road, and I took one. After parking, I started to get out of my car, and then I noticed the red car. It was parallel parking on the side of the road just a few spaces behind me. My heart sank. I decided to go to the spot that I was meeting my friend at. I would just have to walk a couple of blocks. So after leaving my car, I started quickly walking down the sidewalk. Before I made it around the corner though, I looked back. When I did, I saw a man leave the red car and start walking in my direction. He was wearing a black jacket and also sunglasses. I continued to go towards my destination. I checked over my shoulder every minute or so. The man followed me all the way there, but he didn't get closer to me. He remained a good distance back. After arriving, I met my friend and told her about what was going on. I pointed the man out to her. Now, where we were, there was a number of other people around. My friend suggested that we go and confront the guy. He couldn't do anything with all these people around, so we both started to approach him. He was just kind of standing around in the corner, looking inconspicuous. When we got within maybe 30 feet of him, he turned and started walking away. I thought then that he was gone. We then went back and forgot all about him. So several hours later, I was leaving. I walked back to my car, and by now it was nighttime. But as I was starting to get inside of my car, I noticed that the red car was still there. I stopped and did not get inside of my car. Instead, I turned and started walking in the other direction. I heard a car door opening and then noticed that the guy was getting out of his car. I couldn't believe that he had been there the entire time. Once again, he started walking in my direction. Now, I started to walk on the sidewalk just to get away from the guy. I kept going and was hoping to get to a busier street. The particular sidewalk that we were on was now quiet at this time of night. The man stayed a ways back. I turned a corner and reached a slightly busier street, and that's when I saw a police car. It was parked on the side of the road with an officer inside of it. I walked straight for the car. When I arrived, I said hi to the officer and told him what was going on. I looked and noticed the man going back around the corner. The police officer then walked with me to my car. When we got near, the red car drove away. After that, I was able to get home without being followed, and I haven't seen the guy or the red car since. I still don't know how to explain it. I'm not sure why he was following me. It was very creepy. This is something that happened back during my freshman year of high school. It was early in the school year, and I was 14 years old. During this time, I had just recently gotten my first cell phone, which was an iPhone. I'd gotten a lot of apps, such as Snapchat and all the other popular ones. I was fairly new to the school district that I was in as well, and had just moved to the city during middle school. Every day, I would get up and ride the bus to and from school. One day, I got home from school just like any other. My parents were still at work, so I was at home by myself. I was added by a person on Snapchat who I did not know. I don't even remember what exactly their username was. I think the name was Joe or John something, and then a few numbers. This was back in 2013, so Snapchat was still fairly new, and I was also very new to it. I added this person back, and thought that maybe it was a guy who went to my school. The school was large and there were tons of people who I didn't really know yet. So not long after adding this guy back, he sent me a snap. I remember that he did not show his face, and it was either a black screen or close to it. There were words on it though, and he said hi, and then I said hi back to him. Then he asked me if I had a Kik. I did, and I gave him my username, and then he added me there a short time after. If anybody doesn't know, Kik was an instant messaging app for chatting. You could send messages as well as pictures, and I think go into chat rooms as well. I believe the app is still around, but it was a lot more popular back then. Also during this time, Snapchat did not have a chat feature. You could only send pictures, and they would also go by pretty fast, and that's another reason why apps like Kik were popular. After adding each other on Kik, the guy started messaging me there. At first, it was just a really casual conversation. I remember that I was curious as to who he was exactly. Looking back, I wish I had never talked to him, but I didn't really have that many friends at the time, and it was nice to talk to somebody. However, I was under the impression that it was a guy around my age maybe, so we were just having a very basic conversation. It was just like, "What's up? Not much, how about you?" Just hanging out. I remember that he asked me who was at my house, and I said that I was alone. That's when this guy said that he was going to come over. I thought that it was a joke. I had no idea who this guy was still, and obviously he wouldn't know where I lived. I don't remember what exactly I said back, but I didn't hear from him for a while. Never did I ever think that he would actually come to my house though. I was just in my room doing homework and half watching YouTube videos on my phone. After maybe 20 or 30 minutes, there was this knock at the front door. I had no idea who it could be, but I didn't bother to get up from my desk or leave my room because I thought that it was just a door-to-door salesman or something. I had no interest of answering the door to that. But then I saw that the guy sent me another message on Kik. He said that he was at my house. I really couldn't believe it. But then he sent me a picture of my front door. I was really freaked out when I saw it. He told me to come to the door. I really didn't know what to say. Finally, I took my phone and I wrote back. I said, "Who even are you?" The guy didn't answer right away. I got up from my desk and walked to the doorway of my room. This led out into the hallway, and then the living room was off of that. I carefully left my room and went out into the hallway. Then, once there, I crept to the corner and looked into the living room. I could see out of the front window from there. The front step was partially obstructed, but I did see a man standing there. He was not a high school student. It was a grown man, probably in his 40s. He was kind of short, a little bit bigger, and balding. I had never seen him before in my life. He was looking around, and then I heard him knock on the door. I stayed where I was. I was really creeped out now and didn't know what to do. The guy stayed there and then actually tried opening the door before knocking on it. I stayed where I was and I didn't move. After a few minutes, I saw him on his phone, and then he turned and he walked off. But he wasn't leaving. He was just going around to the back door. He walked around, and within a couple of minutes, I heard a knocking coming from the back door to the house. Then he tried opening that door. I looked to my phone and it was blowing up with notifications. I went over and looked at them. The man kept asking me to let him in and to open the door. Instead, I decided to call the police. I took my phone, closed my bedroom doors, and then went under my bed and called 911. I told them that somebody was trying to get into the house and would not leave. I was told that the police would be on the way and they would arrive within a few minutes. While I was waiting, I tried not to pay attention to the man knocking on the doors. I just hoped that he would go away soon. After probably 5 to 10 minutes, I stopped hearing the knocking at the doors. When the police got there, I finally left my room again. Unfortunately, the man was gone. When I looked back to Kik, he had sent me a few more messages cursing at me. I showed everything to the police. They said they would look into it, and if the man came back, to call them again. My parents got informed as well, and they were back home a short time later. Luckily, after that, I never saw the guy again. I'm still not sure how he knew where I lived or even who I was. The only thing that I can think of is that he must have seen me either getting on the bus for school or after school. It still creeps me out to think back to it. Back in the day, I used to go on Omegle from time to time. Omegle recently shut down, and when I heard about it, I was reminded of my own crazy experience. If anybody doesn't know, Omegle was a video chat website. You would use a webcam and would be randomly paired with a stranger. You could chat live on video, or you could just chat by typing as well. And you could skip the person whenever you wanted, and then it would find somebody else. From time to time back when I was in high school and was bored, I would go on there. One time, I was just hanging out in my bedroom. As it got later at night and I was not tired, I just randomly decided to go on Omegle. When I first got on, I don't remember the exact people that I saw, but it was pretty typical. Most of them, either I skipped or they skipped me within the first 10 seconds. Then, about 5 minutes in, I was paired with this one guy. Right away, he looked really strange and also creepy, which caused me to not skip him just because it was fascinating. The guy was in a mostly dark room, and his eyes were very wide. He had a very strange hairstyle as well, and he was just staring at the screen very intensely. I figured he was just messing around trying to look as creepy as he could as a joke. It certainly worked. After he just stared at me on the screen for a while though, I finally said hi. The guy asked who I was, and I just said my first name. He definitely seemed off, and it was really weird. He remained staring at me the entire time, and he spoke in a very monotone way. I thought about skipping him, but I was also interested to see what else he would say. I asked him his name, but he did not tell me. He just asked me where I lived, but I didn't tell him that. Then he just stared at the screen and didn't take his eyes off me for a really long time. I asked him a couple of questions, but he completely ignored them. So at that point, I finally decided to skip him. He was just a little bit too weird. I matched up with some other random person. Then it was more of the same, mostly skipping or getting skipped pretty early on. I had a few short conversations with people that weren't bad. About 15 minutes later though, I was paired with the one creepy guy again. It's extremely rare to see the same person twice on Omegle, or at least it had been in my experience. When I saw him again, I didn't skip him because I was shocked that he was there. He was doing the same thing of just staring at me and not really moving much. I tried talking to him again, but he didn't answer me, so then I skipped him again. About 5 minutes later though, I saw him yet again. I was really creeped out now. I asked him why I kept seeing him. He finally spoke, just saying my name. I had forgotten that I told him earlier in the moment, so I got really freaked out. Then the guy said that I could not get away from him. I was so spooked at that point that I closed out of Omegle altogether. I went on Facebook or something for a few minutes after that. But after a while longer, I wasn't really scared anymore, so I went back onto Omegle. When I got there, I matched with some random guy and I quickly skipped him. Then, for yet another time, I was matched with the creepy guy. He looked exactly the same. He was still staring intensely right at me. When he saw me, he said my name again, and he said that I would not get away from him. Then he just started staring at me. I lost it, and I quickly closed Omegle again. Then I turned off my computer altogether and unplugged it from the wall. I sat there trying to figure out what on earth had just happened and how I kept matching with this guy. I was afraid that he had somehow hacked my computer or something. After a little while though, I soon plugged the computer back in and turned it on. However, I did not go back on Omegle, and I never went on Omegle again. I still wonder about that sometimes. It would say on Omegle how many people were currently online, and it was always like in the thousands, so I just can't believe that I kept matching with this one guy. I'm glad that I never saw him again. This story happened way back in the day. I was about 12 years old or so, and I remember that I used to sometimes go on the computer. This was the early 2000s, and we had a desktop in the corner of the living room. Mostly I would play games on it, but I would also go on the internet and play games or go on websites for kids or teens. One time when I was at a friend's house, she showed me a chat room where she would talk with random people. We had a fun time just messing around and talking to people, making jokes and stuff. So one time when I was at home, I was bored later at night and I went into a chat room. I don't even remember exactly what the website was, but I entered the chat room and I started talking with random people. Nobody in the chat room could see anybody else. I remember that I started talking with this one person. I don't remember everything in the conversation that was said because it was so long ago, but I'm pretty sure that there was just some basic talk in the beginning. Then I remember that the person asked me where I lived. I told the person the state and city that I lived in. The person asked me where in the city. I didn't give out the exact address, but I gave a little bit more specific detail. I know this sounds really stupid, but this was a long time ago. There was no social media back then, and I was also very young. I didn't really think that it was that bad or that anything would happen. We talked a little longer, but this person started to ask me some weird questions. At that point, I decided to leave. I was feeling kind of creeped out. I went off the website and then I started playing some games instead. After a while of that, I got tired and I went to bed. The very next night, I found myself in a similar situation. It was later at night and I was still awake. My parents were asleep, so I was the only one that was still up. I remember that I went onto the computer again. I did not go to a chat room though. I was on some website where you can play mini games and stuff. Out of nowhere, I remember I heard the sound like somebody was walking up to the front door. The door happened to be just a few feet away from the computer where I was. I looked over, but you couldn't really see anything out of the small window at the top of the door. Instantly, I was a little bit scared. I knew that it was really late at night, and probably nobody should be at our door at this hour. I was expecting somebody to knock on the door, but they didn't. I just sat there and listened, but heard nothing more. After probably about a minute, I decided to get up and look. I walked out into the living room and carefully went over to the window. Then I moved the window shade and looked out. When I did, I saw that there was this random man standing on the front step. I did not know who he was or why he was at our house. I moved away from the window in case he would have somehow looked over and seen me. I went back over to the computer. That's when the man tried opening the door, which was thankfully locked. After a few minutes, there was a light knocking at the door. It was very quiet. This was really strange. It was almost like he knew that I was near the door or right on the other side. He only knocked that one time though. Then things were silent for a while. After probably like 5 minutes, I went back to the window and I looked again. When I did, the man was gone. I was wondering still who this guy was and why he was there. Shortly after, I remembered the guy from the chat room and how he had asked me where I lived. Could this have been him? I decided to go back to the website. I logged back in and looked at the conversation that we had. I noticed that after I had left the conversation, he sent me a message saying, "I'm going to come to your house." That was the last thing that was said in the chat. I quickly logged back out, and I was too scared to go back there. After that night, the guy thankfully never returned. I don't know how he found me, but it really gives me the creeps to think about it.
This is something that happened a few years ago. I buy things on eBay here and there, and have been doing so for years. I like to collect things like sports memorabilia, and occasionally I bid on auctions. One time I saw this autographed football that was signed by one of my favorite players. It had 0 bids, and the starting bid was pretty low. I expected it to go way up, but I entered my maximum bid and then moved on, thinking maybe I had a shot at winning it. The auction still had several days left. Over the next few days, I actually forgot all about it. Then, I got a notification that I had won the auction and I could pay for the signed ball now. When I looked, I couldn't believe it. Not one single other person had bid on the ball, and I had won. I don't remember the exact price. I think it was maybe like $10. It was probably worth a lot more, maybe over $50. I was really excited and paid the money. The very next night, though, I was at home when my phone rang. During this time, I had a landline phone that I had for years. I did not recognize the number on the caller ID, so I didn't answer it. What followed shortly after was a message. A man's voice came onto my answering machine, and he said that he was trying to reach me and mentioned my name. He said that I had won his auction for the football, and unfortunately nobody else bid on it. Then he said that I was getting way too good of a deal, and it wasn't fair at all, but he was going to do me a favor and mail it anyways. He went on to say that he expects me to leave him a very good review after this. Now, this rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't like how he called me up on my personal phone to say this. I won his auction fair and square. If he didn't want the risk of somebody paying $10 for it, then he shouldn't have started the bidding so low. He knew the risks. I went on eBay and looked at some other listings of the same player's autograph on a football. They were going for a little over $50, so the guy lost out on about $40. It's not that big of a deal. Just 2 days later, I received the football in the mail. It was fast shipping because I guess the guy lived in the same state as me. After receiving the football, it was packaged well and just how it looked online. I went on eBay to leave the good review that the seller wanted so badly. To be honest, I really didn't want to leave him a good review after what he did. It kind of annoyed me. But when I logged into eBay, I noticed that he had already left me a negative review. On eBay, sellers and buyers can leave each other reviews. You can leave it positive, negative, or neutral. This affects your feedback, and people are less likely to buy or sell to you if you have a bad rating. Mine had been perfect to that point, and his was pretty good. I think it was like 99% positive. His negative review of me said, "Buyer got way too good of a deal." Clearly, he was upset about it, but I did not feel that it was fair for him to leave me a bad review. What was I supposed to do? I bid and I won. Did he expect me to offer to pay more for no reason? It angered me that he left me a bad review, so I left him a bad review. I said what happened. I said, "I won the auction from this seller for a good deal." He then called my home phone complaining and demanded that I leave him a good review. He sent me a message after this, which I ignored. I didn't even open it. Then, the next day, he called me again. I didn't answer, and he left another message. This one was very angry. He berated me for about 3 minutes straight. I didn't even listen to the whole thing and deleted it. But this didn't stop him. He called me again several times the next day. I got frustrated, and luckily I had call blocker installed on my landline. I blocked his number so that he would finally stop bothering me. For several days, everything was fine. But then, one night, I was at home, and out of nowhere got a knock on my front door. I walked down to the front door, but before opening it, looked outside. It was a man who I did not recognize. I didn't know why he would be here. I answered the door, and the man standing there mentioned my name and asked if that was me. I said yes. He then told me that he sold me a football on eBay not long ago. As soon as I heard that, I slammed the door right in his face. This caused him to start aggressively banging on my door. I yelled at him to go away or I was calling the cops. He was yelling and demanding that I give him the ball back, saying that I scammed him. I couldn't believe this guy. I'm not sure if he was really just mad about the ball at this point, or if he was just mad at me. He kept standing there and knocking on my door every so often. After he didn't leave for over 10 minutes, I called the police on him. When they arrived about 10 minutes after that, the man was still there. They spoke with him, and he gave his side of the story, which I'm not even sure what that was. An officer came inside and spoke to me, and said that the man outside kept claiming that I scammed him and stole his autographed football. I told the officer the whole story, and I showed him eBay proof on my phone. After a while, the police ruled in favor of me. They said that the transaction was fair and I owned the football. They told the man that he had to leave my property and told him not to come back. Eventually, the man agreed and left. After that, I never heard from him again. I still have the football, and every time I look at it, I laugh when I remember the crazy story that goes with it. Several months ago, I sold my PlayStation 5 on eBay. My friend was getting rid of his PS5 for an Xbox, so he sold it to me for a really good price. His PlayStation 5 was a little bit nicer than the version that I had, so I decided to sell mine. I listed it for a good price on eBay as a buy it now rather than an auction. Somebody bought it after just 2 days, and the very next day, I packaged it up really good and shipped it. I sent it to the address that was given from the eBay account that bought it from me. Now, 3 days after I shipped the PlayStation, and 4 days after it was sold, I got a message on eBay from the buyer. He told me that he recently moved and forgot to put his new address on his eBay account. Then he asked me that I ship it to his new address instead. I responded and told him that I already shipped the PlayStation several days ago and that it was too late. The guy freaked out, saying that I should give him a refund because he wasn't going to get it. I told him that he should have realized that, either before he bought it or within the first day. What was I supposed to do? Sit around waiting for his blessing for me to ship it? I mean, normally, people want things shipped as fast as possible after they buy it. He said that he was going to report me to eBay, but that didn't really scare me because I knew I had done nothing wrong. I told the guy that the package will have his name on it, so he should either go to his old address and pick it up, or contact whoever now lives there and ask them to send it to him. In my mind, that was a very logical solution. Obviously, if it was at the wrong address, there was a chance that somebody would steal it, but I mailed it in a box where it wasn't obvious that it was a PS5. The guy did not seem to think my ideas were good. He just told me that he needed a refund, and he kept threatening me, saying that he would have my eBay account banned. I told him that I wasn't going to refund him. Over the next few days, the guy kept harassing me, sending me messages. He kept saying that I had to give him a refund. He really wanted the money, but I wasn't going to give it to him. I just ignored him. So about a week later, I was looking at some of the messages that he sent me, and I decided to look him up, just for the heck of it. His username seemed to be his actual name. It was a first name, an underscore, and then a last name and a bunch of numbers. The last name was somewhat unique sounding, so I thought that I might be able to find him. I wanted to know what this guy looked like that was harassing me so much. I went onto Facebook and entered his name. Just one result came up, and it was a younger looking man. His page was public, so I could see everything that he posted and stuff, and he was quite active. I scrolled down just a little bit and saw a post that nearly blew my mind. He had posted a picture of a PlayStation 5 with the caption, "Just got this bad boy in the mail. Hit me up if you want to play some COD." The PlayStation looked just like the one that I had sold, and it was dated just 3 days after I had mailed the PlayStation, and the very same day that the guy told me that he had the wrong address. This guy was totally trying to scam me. It was a pretty bad attempt too, to be honest. I screenshotted the post and then sent it to him on eBay. The guy claimed that it wasn't him. Then he backtracked and said that it was his friend's PS5, not his. Then he backtracked again and called me a curse word. After that, I never heard from him again. I buy things on eBay all the time. I've bought things from video games to phones and even computers. I've also sold a couple of items as well. This is something that took place just last year. My mom's birthday was coming up, and I wanted to get her a new phone because the one that she was using was old and slow. She uses an iPhone, and I think she had like a 7 or 8 or something. I was looking up newer ones and was trying really hard to find a great deal. I should have just paid a fair price and bought one from one of those companies that refurbish them. That way you know what you're getting and everything is handled professionally. But instead, I got carried away trying to get the best deal. I was constantly scouring the latest listings and auctions. I found one that was a really good deal. It was selling for about $100 less than I would expect to pay for the phone. It was still several $100s though. There were a few pictures of the phone in what appeared to be the person's house. In the listing, the seller said that it worked great, but they had gotten a different phone and no longer needed it. It seemed legit, and I looked at the seller and they didn't have any other items for sale, but did have a 99% rating. When I saw where the seller was located, I noticed that it was in a city very close to me, only like 30 minutes away. That meant it would probably only take like a day or two to ship. I decided to buy it and felt really good with the money that I would be saving. A couple of days later, and the phone arrived in the mail. As soon as I unboxed it though, I realized that I had been scammed. The phone that I received was not even close to what I bought. It was one of those cheap Android phones that you can get for like $40 at Walmart. I really couldn't believe it. I went onto eBay and compared what it said I bought versus what I received. I had gotten scammed badly. I contacted the seller, demanding an explanation. When I did, I got no response. After not hearing back from him, I contacted eBay and reported his profile as well. I now saw that he had another listing of the same phone that I bought. I left a negative review, warning anybody else and telling them what had happened. I hoped that nobody else would fall for his scam. After several days of trying to contact the seller and communicating with eBay, things finally got resolved. I was able to get a refund from my bank, and I was told that the account got suspended as well. I was able to buy my mom an actual iPhone for her birthday. I was still mad about what happened though, but not long after I found out the account had been banned, I think the same night or else the next one. It was late at night and I was literally in bed about to fall asleep. I was on my phone until I got tired. It was probably a little bit after midnight, and suddenly I heard a loud bang at the back of my house. During that time, I rented a smaller house, which I lived by myself in. I got up from my bed and walked to the doorway. The sound came from the back of my house on the other side. Then I heard it again. It was followed by another bang, which I could hear was from the kitchen window at the back of the house. My bedroom was at the front of the house, so it was a ways away, but I could still hear it very clearly because of how loud it was. Somebody was there. I heard whoever was there start hitting the window repeatedly. I didn't waste any time and went back inside my bedroom and locked the door behind me. Then I got my phone and called the police. I told them that it sounded like somebody was trying to break into my house. Shortly after, I heard glass breaking. They had succeeded in breaking in. I let the police know, and they said that some officers should arrive shortly. Then I heard more loud noises. This time, inside. It sounded like whoever was inside was just destroying things or hitting everything in sight. I heard glass breaking, chairs falling over, and other loud noises. This went on for about a minute straight, and then stopped. Things became very silent after. I heard a little bit of noise coming from the back of the house as if somebody was walking. Then that stopped too, and everything was completely silent. I remained in my room until the police got there. When I came out of my room, I saw that everything in my kitchen had been all messed up. My back window was smashed, glass was all over the place, and lots of other things were on the floor. Several dishes and cups had been smashed. My table and chairs in the kitchen were all knocked over. Lots of things from the cabinet were on the floor, and I saw several dents in the cabinets and furniture. They basically just trashed my kitchen and left. I told the police everything that I could, and then they left. I stayed with my parents for the rest of the night, and the entire next week as well. My window got replaced, and I got some new furniture. I only lived in that house for a few months after, and I don't live there anymore. Since then, everything's been fine, but I never found out who did it. I truly believe that it was the person who scammed me on eBay. I think they were angry that I got their account taken down. If they were running that blatant of a scam, there's no telling what they could do. Plus, they knew my address from shipping me the phone, and I had seen that they lived not very far away from me. Luckily, I don't live there anymore. Hopefully, nobody else gets scammed.
I have a best friend named Samantha, and we hang out with each other all the time. When we aren't hanging out, we FaceTime with each other on a regular basis. This is something that happened a few years ago when we were in college. Samantha and I attended different universities. They were a couple of hours away from each other, so we were not able to hang out as much. We would often FaceTime with each other at night when we weren't doing anything. During this time, I lived in a house with 2 other roommates. One night, both of my roommates were gone, and I was home by myself doing homework. It was approaching the late night hours, and probably like 10 or 11 o'clock. I was FaceTiming with Samantha, and we were both doing homework at our desks. I was working on some sort of assignment and having a tough time with it. I had my phone propped up on my desk, and mostly facing me. At some point, I remember Samantha asked me if my roommates were back yet. I knew that they weren't, and I said no. Samantha then told me that she thought she saw someone in the hallway behind me. I didn't know what she was talking about at first. She told me to look behind me, and I did, but saw nothing. In my bedroom, I was facing the wall and my window. Behind me and to the left a little bit was my doorway, which was open. The hallway was dark because all the lights were off. After looking and seeing nothing, I asked Samantha what exactly she saw. She told me that she wasn't 100% sure, but it looked like a man was walking down the hallway and then looked into my room. When I heard this, it did give me the creeps. I checked on Snapchat to see if my roommates were back, although I was sure that I would have heard them. Neither of them were back yet. The lighting was not the best, so there was a chance that Samantha didn't actually see that, but I didn't know why it would look like there was a guy there. It was just hard to believe. I walked over to my doorway and looked out. The hallway was dark, but nobody was in it. My roommates' bedrooms and a closet and bathroom were also on the hallway. Every door aside from the closet was open a little bit, which is how things usually were. I closed my bedroom door and then went back to my desk. Samantha and I continued talking, and I tried to focus on my homework again, although it was hard now. Probably about 10 minutes later, I suddenly heard the sound of my bedroom door opening. It was very slow, and when I heard it, I suddenly looked behind me. For a split second, I saw someone at the door. It appeared to be a man, but as fast as I saw him, he moved back and disappeared. He went into the dark hallway, and my door was left slightly open. Samantha was saying that she saw the guy again. At that point, I called the police and then went back over and closed my door. Unfortunately, there was no lock on it. I went to my closet and hid inside of it. Luckily, in this time, the man did not return. I didn't know where he was at this point, but probably 5 minutes after I called the police, I heard a back door to our house closing. I didn't leave my closet though. Soon after, the police arrived, and they searched the house, but the guy was gone. I guessed I had heard him leaving, so I never found out exactly who he was or what he was doing. That was one of the scariest moments I've ever had for sure. When my roommates got back, I told them about it, and I think one of them had left the back door unlocked, so that's most likely how the man got in. I still don't know who he was though, and luckily he never came back. This is something that happened just a few months ago. It's still fresh in my mind, and something that I hope never happens again. So I don't remember exactly when, but I got a random FaceTime one day on my iPhone. It was from a number that I didn't recognize. Now I have basically everybody that I know and text with in my phone, and I have their names in the contacts. So I figured that this must be a new person, but I didn't have any idea as to who it could be. Because of this, I did not answer the call. The number didn't bother to text me or anything, so at that point, I figured that it was a wrong number maybe. I mostly forgot about it until the number tried FaceTiming me again. I don't know how long this was after the first one, maybe a few days. But after that, this number kept randomly FaceTiming me, but I never answered it, and they would never text or call or anything. It was always FaceTime. The times were normal when it started, but then I noticed that it was often late at night. So after probably like the 5th FaceTime call, I decided to text the number and ask them who they were. Unfortunately though, I did not receive a response from them. I thought that was really weird. They tried FaceTiming me again the next night though, and at that point I should have blocked the number. I honestly don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. I didn't answer that one either. So then, one night, pretty late again, I got another FaceTime from the number. I'm not really sure why, but I just decided to answer that time. I was home by myself, just chilling in my bedroom. I lived alone in a house, and it was probably almost midnight. So when I answered the call, I finally saw the person. It appeared to be a man, and he was actually wearing a black ski mask covering his face. So I found this to be a little bit strange, but I also noticed that the guy was outside. He looked to be walking down a street. I said hello and asked him why he kept calling me. The guy didn't answer though. Instead, he just kept on walking. I asked him who he was, but he didn't answer that either. Then, as he continued walking, he turned the camera from facing him to facing what was in front of him. For a second, I saw the street that he was walking on, but then he raised the camera up more, and I saw that he was going through a neighborhood. When he stopped and focused the camera on a house, I quickly noticed that it was my house. At that point, things got real, because I thought that he was just some random guy in a random city before that. But no, he was right outside my house. I asked once more who he was, but he didn't answer me then either. Then he hung up on me. By now, I was very nervous. I went over and looked out the front window in the living room. I saw the man standing out in the street. Then he took a step into my front yard. When he started walking through the yard, I moved away from the window. I really didn't know what he was planning to do. For the next minute or so, I didn't see him. Then there was a sudden knocking, not at my front door, but at my back door. I walked towards the back of the house and yelled that if he didn't leave, I was calling the police. He moved away from the back door, and I thought that he might actually be leaving. But a short time later, he then knocked on the front door. Then I did call the police, and I told them what was going on. I was just hoping that this guy would not break in. He returned to the back door a short time later and knocked on it again. But after that, things went quiet for a while. Then, a short time later, the police got there. They looked around my yard, but the man was gone. I guess he had left just on time before the police showed up. I told them the whole story, but not much could really be done. They said to call again if the guy came back. I was afraid for the rest of the night that he would, but he actually didn't. After that, I never saw him again. I blocked his number, and I never heard from him again either. A few years back, I was FaceTiming my friend late at night. It was my best friend Matt, and we would FaceTime quite a bit. During this time, I lived in an apartment by myself. So we had been on call with each other for a few hours, just chopping it up. Then I got another FaceTime call from some random number. I didn't know who it was, and I told Matt about it. He said that I should answer the call and see who it was. I was pretty curious as well, so I ended the call with Matt and answered the FaceTime. When I did, I saw this man who I did not recognize. His eyes were really wide, like he was purposely opening them almost as big as he could, and he was also holding the phone super close to his face. It made him look just really weird and creepy in general. I asked who the guy was, and he responded by saying my name. I was confused and asked him how he knew me, but he basically just started threatening me at that point. He was talking in this weird, half-whispered voice and saying a bunch of nonsense, like he was saying that I needed to watch my back and that he was coming for me and that kind of stuff. It was hard to understand everything he was saying because he was talking weird and rambling on, and he was also talking pretty quiet. Now I had no clue as to who he was and how he even knew me. I tried asking him a couple of times, but he never answered me. It was so strange that eventually I just hung up. Then I called Matt back and told him the crazy story of the guy. Of course, Matt thought that it was really funny and couldn't stop laughing. I was laughing too, but I didn't really find it as funny. I mean, some random creepy guy was threatening me as if he was a stalker or something. What if he really was? I didn't know how he knew my name, number, or any other information. As I was talking with Matt, he called again like 5 minutes later. I told Matt this, and I once again answered the guy's call. This time, it was more of the same, as he continued his rant. I tried to interrupt him, and asked him several times who he was and what he wanted. The man then just started staring right into the camera with extremely wide eyes. He stopped talking entirely, and was just staring. This went on for an uncomfortable amount of time. Now, I was asking him things, and he wasn't saying anything at all. At that point, I told him that I was blocking him, and I hung up. Then I actually did block his number. I called Matt again, and told him about what had happened, and we continued to talk. The guy didn't bother me for the rest of the night. I was wondering if he would call back with another number or something, or show up at my apartment maybe, but luckily he didn't. And for like 2 weeks, nothing strange happened. I had basically forgotten about the entire thing. But randomly, like 2 weeks later, I got another FaceTime. I don't know why, but I answered it. I was at home, and it was sometime at night. It was the same guy doing basically the same thing. As soon as I saw him, I hung up the phone, and I blocked this number as well. I really didn't know what to make of this. I figured that he would call back again with another number or something. But after that, I never got another call. I still wonder about it. Who was that guy? And how did he know all that information about me? I've thought about it over and over again, and I can't come up with a good answer. It still gives me the creeps to think about it. But I'm just glad that he hasn't bothered me since, and hopefully never will. This is something that happened back when I was a 10-year-old kid. During this time, I lived with my parents and sister in a very populated neighborhood. It was a residential area with countless streets, houses, and parks. And every year on the 4th of July, there would be a huge parade. The parade route would go down our street every time. So we would go outside and sit on the edge of the yard and watch it. Our house was somewhat uphill from the road, so the yard slanted down a little and it gave a good view of the parade. The parade would be sometime in the late morning, and I remember on the year of this story, we went outside a while before it started. Some people had already started to gather around and sit on the curbs of the street and stuff. We went to our usual spot. I remember that my sister and I would always go really close to the street. Soon the parade started. I enjoyed it because a lot of the people that were in the parade would toss candy at the kids, and I would get a bunch every year. So the parade was going on, and there were tons of people involved. There were a lot of floats as well as people walking. The first thing strange that I noticed was that there was a guy who was dressed in a red, white, and blue jacket and a long beard. He was walking and waving to people and stuff, but then when he went past us, he appeared to walk into our yard. There were these 2 huge trees at the end of our yard. Well, one of the trees was in our yard, and the other was in our next-door neighbor's property, technically. He sort of went between the 2 trees, and I didn't really know what he was doing there. That area is sort of out of the way, because there was also a really big bush nearby. But still, with all of these people around, I couldn't be the only one who noticed him, but it kind of seemed like I was. He went out of my sight though, appearing to go into our next door neighbor's property. I went right back to watching the parade at that point and forgot all about it. As a kid, I didn't really think too much of it. The parade went on for probably another 20 or 30 minutes, and I had forgotten all about the man. When the parade ended, people slowly started to clear out. My family was going to my grandparents' house, who only lived a couple of miles away. We went back inside for maybe an hour and then left. So we were at my grandparents' until probably around sunset. At that time, I remember we left and headed back home. After the probably 5-minute drive back to our house, we got out of the car and headed inside. But when we got to the front door, I remember we noticed a couple of things that were strange. One was that the screen to our house was open a little. We had a screen door and then an actual door, and the screen door would never shut all the way unless you forced it shut, which we always did. So it seemed as though somebody had been to our door. Also, there were some flowers planted below a window out front, and some of them appeared to have been trampled. We realized somebody had been in our yard while we were away, and this person had either tried entering our front door or had knocked on it. We figured that with it being the 4th of July, there were probably a lot of people out in the neighborhood. Many people on the street were having barbecues and that sort of stuff. It's possible some people were just messing around and cut through our yard or something. Perhaps some teenagers or drunk young adults did it. Either way, we went inside the house, but were a little bit nervous. However, after turning on all the lights, everything seemed to be just fine. I quickly felt much better and was no longer worried. We were going to go out into the backyard and play with some sparklers. We were also going to have a fire in the small fire pit that we had in the yard and make s'mores. I can't remember what my parents and sister were busy doing inside, but they said that they would be out in a minute. I decided to go out into the backyard first. So I went into the dark backyard, which was only lit by a light in the back of the house. When I got back there, almost instantly after closing the back door, I heard a noise. I really wasn't sure what it was, but I knew that a bush had moved. In our neighborhood with how populated it was, we really didn't get many animals. Maybe an occasional rabbit and lots of squirrels, but whatever made this noise was definitely much larger. I looked over in the direction but did not see anything. There were several trees and bushes in the yard all around, and it wasn't well lit. I stayed out there, and after a few moments of nothing, I convinced myself that it was just some sort of an animal. I started to walk around the yard, just waiting for my parents and sister. During this time, I was walking near the back of the house when I saw something. There was something blue on the ground underneath a bush. I honestly don't know how I spotted it, but I walked over and looked closer. There was a big blue jacket, like the one the man in the parade had been wearing. It was all crumpled up and really small. I noticed that it was also red, white, and blue, and I looked inside the jacket, and there was the fake long white beard that the guy was wearing too. This probably belonged to the same guy who was walking into our yard at the parade. I then remembered that. I was creeped out and wanted to go back inside now. When I moved away from the bush, that's when I saw the guy. There was a man standing at the far back of our yard near the fence, and he was walking slowly along the edge of it. I quickly ran to the back door and went in. I locked the door behind me and found my parents. When I told them about the guy, they called the police. Then we waited inside without hearing or seeing anything from the man. When the police got there, they searched the backyard, but the man was gone. His things that he had hid in the bushes were also gone. After the police left, I was pretty nervous that the guy would return, but he didn't. I think that when he noticed I saw him, he must have decided to leave. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't noticed him. This happened a few years ago. I was hosting a 4th of July party at my house. It wasn't actually the 4th, but it was the weekend of the 4th. So I live in a smaller and older house not far outside of the city. A few coworkers had been to my place before, and somehow I got nominated to host the 4th of July party. There would be over 30 people coming most likely, about 20 coworkers, and many were bringing their significant others. So my house has 2 stories, and then a small front yard and a small backyard as well. The entire backyard is basically just a patio. There's a few feet along the west side of it that's grass. The backyard is entirely fenced in, aside from my driveway, which leads to an alley and then my garage. The property is pretty closed off from my neighbors. So I got ready for the party by getting a bunch of food and drinks and things like that. I set up, and when the day came, a bunch of my coworkers started coming over. It was a nice and sunny day, and people could be outside or inside in the air conditioning. I remember that after the party started, things were going very well at first. Everybody seemed to be having a good time, and I was outside, but then went in. I was talking with a few people in my house for a while. When I went into the kitchen, one of my coworkers approached me and said that a weird guy was there. She thought that maybe I knew him and said that nobody outside seemed to know who he was. I was very confused, and I asked her to show me the guy. We both went over to the doorway leading out to the backyard. When we got there, a bunch of people were in the yard. At first, she couldn't spot him, but she was telling me that he was saying weird stuff and making some people uncomfortable. Overall, something seemed off about the guy. Finally, she located him and pointed the guy out. I then walked outside and got a better look. The man was somewhat large, had kind of messy hair that went past his ears, and was drinking a beer. I did not recognize this man at all. He was sort of standing by himself in the corner, near where the alleyway was. He appeared to just kind of be watching people. I started walking over to approach the guy. I was going to ask him who he was, but when I got about 30 feet away from him, he looked right at me. The man then turned and quickly started walking away back down my narrow driveway, which went from the backyard to past my house and the street. Before making it out of the backyard area though, he stopped, grabbed another beer out of a cooler, and then kept going. I never got to talk to the man, and he walked at a fast pace back down the driveway and then onto the connecting sidewalk. It was really strange. I figured that some random guy was walking by and must have seen there was a party and just stopped in for whatever reason. The neighborhood was pretty busy and did get quite a few people walking down the sidewalks throughout the day and stuff, but this was still really weird. I went around and asked a few people about the guy. Apparently, he was approaching some people and asking strange questions. I was also told that he was just staring at a few people and did not look away for a really long time. At least he was gone now though. I was outside most of the rest of the party. Luckily, the man did not return. After people started leaving to go home, there was maybe an hour before it was just me. Then I started to clean everything up. Not a whole lot needed to be done. Just take out the garbage, take in a few folding tables and some chairs, as well as the food and drinks. As I was doing this, I walked past my narrow driveway to take some garbage out. When I was on the driveway, I looked down it into the street. I noticed that standing right in the middle of my driveway where the sidewalk intersected it was the same man. He was just standing there and staring at me, it appeared. I didn't know what to do, so I sort of waved. The man did not wave back. Then I continued to take out the garbage, which was at the back corner of my backyard. When I was walking back though, I noticed the man was walking up my driveway towards me. I didn't know what he wanted, but I stayed there to meet him. When the man reached me, I said hi to him. The man asked me if he could use my bathroom quick. I really did not want this guy in my house, and I said no. Then I asked the man if he was at the party earlier. The man denied it and said no. Clearly, this was the same guy. He then asked once more if he could go inside my house really quick. I said no to the guy again, but he still didn't leave. By this point, I was getting kind of nervous. I didn't really know what to do or say. I wasn't quite done cleaning, but I wanted to go inside. So I said, "Well, I'll see you later." Then I turned and started walking back towards the back door of my house. But when I did, the man began to follow me. I knew that I couldn't go inside anymore, and I turned to walk in another direction. I figured that the man would continue to follow me, but he didn't. The guy walked right up to my back door, opened it up, and went inside. When I saw this, I started to follow him and I yelled at him to stop, but I realized that maybe this guy could be dangerous. Instead, I went back to the end of the alley and went to my car, which was parked in front of the garage. Then I called the police. I waited there until they arrived. When they got there, the man was found hiding in my basement. It really creeped me out when I heard that. I really don't know who the guy was or why he wanted to go inside of my house, but I remembered back to earlier in the party when he walked away from me after I started to approach him. He seemed to know that I was the homeowner. If he was talking to a bunch of other people, but then walked away from just me, that was odd. I wondered if he had seen me before or something. I'm really glad that I didn't go back into my house after him. I'm not sure what he was capable of. On the 4th of July, back when I was 17 years old, is when this story takes place. During this time, I was in high school and living with my parents. Our house was in this neighborhood kind of near a park. It was a dense neighborhood with lots of other houses nearby. Each year on the 4th, there would be a huge firework display at the park near where we lived. Sometimes we would go to the park, and other times we would just watch the fireworks from our yard. They were still pretty easy to see from there. The entire neighborhood would always be extremely busy during this time. Many people from all over the city would come to watch these fireworks, and just about everybody who lived in the neighborhood would either go to the park or go outside. There would be a lot of cars parked on the side of the streets, and a big traffic jam in the area before and after. That year, a few of my friends from school were going to the park for the fireworks, and I was joining them. Some lived in the area and others were driving. I think that it would be about a total of 5 of us. So that night at around 8 p.m., I left our house to meet with my friends at the park. The fireworks were not supposed to start until 9 something, but we were going to hang out for a while. I saw there was already a lot of cars parked and people on the sidewalks. I made my way to the park, which took me almost 10 minutes to walk there. When I arrived, it was pretty crowded. The park was big, but it also had more than just the fireworks. There were food trucks and a few places to get drinks and things like that. Many people were hanging out and enjoying the night, and I was able to find my friends and we met up. The fireworks took place at the normal time, and we sat in the grass and watched them. When they were over, we talked for a bit and then started going our separate ways. My house was not in the direction that my other friends were going, so I left through the side of the park that connected to my neighborhood and started walking back by myself. The park was still really crowded when I left. At first, going onto the sidewalks, those were really busy as well. But once I had made it a couple of blocks away, it cleared up significantly. I still had a ways to go though. But as I continued to walk, I did notice there was this guy who appeared to be following me. Because when I first noticed him was when I crossed the street. I looked around, and somebody across the street and behind me shot off a firework in their front yard. So when I looked into that direction, I noticed a man on the sidewalk like 40 feet behind me or so. By this time, there was not really anybody else on that sidewalk but me and him. I thought nothing of it though. As I kept going, I soon turned, and the man also turned. Through crossing a few more streets and even turning again, I could still hear the guy's footsteps behind me. I was actually starting to get nervous. He followed me the almost 10-minute walk back, but soon my house was in sight. When I got to my house and was just out front of it, I made a really quick veer off to the right. I walked right up to the front step without looking back and got my keys out. I was able to quickly unlock the door and go inside. Once I was in, I locked the door behind me and I looked back. When I looked out the window, I saw that the guy was now walking out of our front yard, and I saw him make it back onto the sidewalk. So it appeared as though maybe he had started to follow me to the door. I'm really glad that I was able to make it inside so fast. I figured the man was gone, and that was that. My parents were in the living room watching TV. I was inside for maybe 30 minutes, and then there was a knock at the front door. This was pretty strange with it being about 11 o'clock at night. I went over and looked out the window. The same man who had followed me home was standing there. I then went into the living room and told my parents about it. My dad walked over to the door, and after the man knocked again, my dad yelled at him that he was going to call the police. The man turned and sprinted away off the front step and quickly went back onto the sidewalk. After that, he never returned. The memory of this event still gives me the creeps when I think about it. I don't know what that man's plans were that night. This is the story of last spring when I went on a trip with some friends. I was a senior in college during this time, and spring break came in March. My friend group that was going was the 3 other girls that I lived in a house with at school and 1 other. We planned the trip all the way back at the beginning of the school year. We were going to Miami, Florida, which is a popular destination for spring break. There's a good city and beach there, so we were planning to have some fun activities. It was also very cold at the university for us, so we were going to a very warm place in Miami. When spring break came, we all boarded a flight and arrived in Miami on Friday evening. The 5 of us had rented an Airbnb together, which was pretty nice. It was a 3-bedroom house that wasn't that large, but plenty of space for us. It was in a good location, but we saved some money by booking it early. It also wasn't too bad because we split the cost 5 ways. We were staying for a total of 5 days there. The first couple of days went as expected. We went to the beach a lot and to some restaurants and bars nearby, as well as some other places. There were lots of places that we could go pretty close by. Many were within walking distance, or else we would take Ubers or public transportation. Some of the time we would split up a bit, but usually all of us did stuff together. Now, on I believe the 3rd night, we had been out until maybe 10 o'clock or so. Then we all went back to the Airbnb. We had been out since pretty early in the day and most of us were tired. However, I wasn't. I was pretty hungry and wanted to go and get some snacks. I asked anyone if they wanted to come with, but everybody declined. One of my friends did offer to come, but didn't want to get anything, so I said it was fine. I left the Airbnb by myself and started walking towards the street with a lot of places on it. It would take only about 10 minutes to walk to a convenience store. I just had to go back a block or 2 and then take a left. Then I started walking along the street. Now, this street had hotels, restaurants, and some stores on it. By now, it wasn't as busy anymore, but there was still cars driving by here and there and some people walking. I was walking along the sidewalk, looking for a convenience store or something. I was sure that I had seen one before, but I couldn't remember exactly quite where it was. So not long at all after I started walking on this sidewalk, a car came driving up. I had heard it coming up from behind me, but it seemed to slow down right as it was passing. Then the car pulled over about 10 feet in front of me on the side of the road. I thought it was probably an Uber dropping somebody off or something. The car was a black Cadillac sedan, I remember. After coming to the side of the road, I remember seeing the front passenger side window roll down. That was the window that was closest to me. The other windows were pretty tinted, and right when I was almost even with the front passenger side window that was rolled down, I heard a voice. The guy driving called out to me and asked me if I needed a ride. I didn't, and I looked over and said no thanks. The guy driving was wearing sunglasses, and then he told me to hop in. I said no thanks once more, and then just kept walking. Then I watched the car pull away from the spot. I found this situation sort of weird. What made this guy think that I was going to get into his car with him? I had no clue who he was. The car drove away down the street after that, and I kept on walking. Probably less than 5 minutes later, I was still walking on that same sidewalk. Then I heard a car approaching from behind again. I thought nothing of it until I heard it slowing down. When it passed me by, I saw that it was the same Cadillac. This got me a little worried. Once more, it pulled over a little bit in front of me on the side of the street. When it did, I kind of moved to the right a little to be farther away. After the car stopped though, this time the back door opened. When it did, I saw a man step out. The guy started immediately walking towards me. Nobody said anything, and I started walking away from him. I looked around, and nobody else was in the immediate area. I actually started running, and found basically the closest building that was open. It was some kind of restaurant, and I ran for the door and went inside of it. After making it inside, I looked back out. The guy did not follow me to the door, but I saw him walking down the sidewalk just past. Then he turned around and started walking back. I stayed just inside in the small lobby of the restaurant. I watched the guy walk around the sidewalk for like a minute, then returned to the car. When the car drove away once again, I finally left. I walked really fast to the convenience store, which luckily wasn't that far away. I stayed in there for a long time, just in case the car came back around again. Then I walked back as fast as I could. Luckily, I didn't see the man again after that. The rest of the trip was fine, but I was always more careful to look around after that experience. This happened back when I was in high school. I remember that at my school, we would have a spring break that lasted an entire week. It was sometime in March, I believe, and I know that it became a tradition for my family to go on a vacation in that time. We lived up north, and usually would travel somewhere warm down south or something. So on this year in particular, I was a sophomore, and my brother was a senior in high school at the time. We took a family vacation to the beach, and flew there at the start of the weekend. The trip was going to be about a week long, and we were staying in a hotel. The hotel was very close to the beach, and you could walk there. After we flew down there, we were able to go to the hotel pool that night because it was a little bit later. The next day, though, we went to the beach for the first time. I remember that I went into the water at first, but then I went back to our chairs. We had a few chairs with our stuff at them, and the beach was pretty busy this day. My parents and brother were all in the water, and I was a ways away. I started to sunbathe and relax while everyone else played in the water. I would say about 15 minutes into this, and this creepy guy approached me. I remember that out of nowhere, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I jumped up really fast because it startled me. When I looked, I saw a guy standing there. He was probably 40 years older than me, and had messy hair and a scraggly beard. From the start, he was acting creepy. As if it wasn't bad enough to do that, he said hi to me and asked me what I was doing. I didn't really know what to say. I was just like, nothing, I'm just sitting here. Why? Then he said something like he saw me from a ways away and thought I looked pretty good. I told the guy that I was in high school and I asked him to go away. He said okay, and then slowly walked a little ways back. I returned to what I was doing and laid down and closed my eyes, but I just felt like he might still be watching me. So after about a minute, I sat up and looked around. When I did, I saw the guy just standing there like 50 feet away and staring in my direction. I decided to go back in the water after that, so I went into the ocean and found my parents and brother. They were all playing with one of those inflatable beach balls. I joined in and I told them that there was a creepy guy who had come up to me. My dad then went back up to the shore with me to our stuff, and I looked around. The guy was gone by now, though. I looked all around the beach area but couldn't find him. He could be anywhere by now. After that, I stuck with my parents for the rest of the time at the beach that day. For the rest of that day, my family and I did some other fun stuff. We went to some local attractions and restaurants and whatnot. We got back to the hotel that night and were hanging out just before bed. I remember that I was really thirsty, and I said I was going to go down to the lobby to get something. So I left our hotel room and took the elevator down to the lobby. There was a small area with food and beverages where you could buy something. So when I got to the lobby, things were really quiet with it being later at night. It was also a somewhat big area. When I made it down there, I went to the drinks and got a water. It was at that point that I looked back to where I had come from and saw the same guy from the beach. It really took me by surprise, and I instantly was nervous. He was staring at me just like before. I went up to the counter and told the front desk worker my room number. I tried to ignore the guy as I did. After I started walking back out of the lobby, I saw him get up. He started walking closer to me, and he even said hi. I didn't even say hi back to him. I just ran away for the elevators. The guy didn't run after me, but I didn't want to wait for the elevators, so I remembered that I went up the stairs instead. I didn't know why he was in the lobby, if he was staying at the same hotel or what. When I got back upstairs, I told my parents how I saw the creepy guy again. The next day was fine. I didn't see him at all or anything. But the day after that, I did. My brother and I wanted to do some more swimming, but it was nighttime. We had been gone for most of the day. The hotel pool was nice because it remained open really late, and it was also outside. There was a bar area near it, and overall, it was a pretty good pool. So we went down there, and I don't remember what time it was exactly. My brother jumped in the pool and started swimming in it. I got in, but was in the pool for no longer than 5 minutes before I saw the guy enter the pool area. I was so creeped out by seeing him again that I wanted to leave right away. I got out of the pool, dried off, and then started walking out of there. I remember noticing him staring at me once again. When I left the pool area, I was just trying to go back to the hotel room, but the guy started walking after me. I went down the hallway and heard him walking as well. I got towards the elevators and pushed the button for one, but the guy came up like he was going to wait for one too. So at that point, I quickly turned and went for the stairs. I heard the guy walking after me as well. I entered the stairwell and I heard the guy enter. He was about 15 feet behind or so. I walked up to the floor that we were on and I entered the hallway. The guy was still behind me. I had a hotel key, luckily, and then I started sprinting for the door. And surprisingly, the man started sprinting after me. I made it to the door and was struggling to get the key in. I was nervous and fumbling all around with it. I could hear the guy getting closer. Then, finally, I got the door open. I ran inside and slammed the door behind me. The guy actually tried opening it, even though my parents were in the room. My parents were watching a movie on the TV and asked me what was going on. I told them that the creepy guy chased after me. They got up and my dad left the hotel room. I remember that the guy was gone by then though. After that, we went down to the front desk and reported him. And after that night, I didn't see the man for the rest of the trip. I was always looking out for him though. I don't know who he was, but that was one of the biggest creeps I've ever seen. "5 years ago, when I was in college, I went on a spring break trip. I was traveling with my best friend Mackenzie, who was also my roommate. We chose to go to New Orleans on this year, and neither of us had been there before. When we got there, we both checked into our hotel room. It was right on the edge of downtown, and about average. We were both students, so we couldn't afford anything that fancy. We were staying there for almost a week and had lots of things planned. The first couple of nights, we went out to some bars and restaurants. I think it was like the third day that we were there, I started getting these creepy text messages. Out of nowhere, I got a message on my phone that said, "Hey." When I asked who it was, they didn't answer, but they told me to come outside. I thought that it was the wrong number, and I told them that, but then they mentioned my name. They said that they were in New Orleans as well. I was really creeped out by this. I talked with Mackenzie about it, and we couldn't think of who it could possibly be. At this point, it was still pretty early in the night, and Kenzie and I were going out. So after we left, we were at this bar, and it was pretty busy. I noticed that I got another text when I was there. The text from the person said that they were also at the bar and they saw me. This was really creepy, because nobody knew that we were there other than us two. Now I knew this was no joke, and I wondered who it was. But it could have been anyone inside there, and the place was so busy. There was no way of knowing who it was. I texted back, asking who it was, but didn't get a response that I was hoping for. The response said, "Go out back." I wasn't going to do this, obviously. It could be dangerous to go into an alleyway behind the bar to meet some creep that somehow had my number and knew who I was. I didn't respond to this. Instead, I looked around carefully, hoping to see somebody staring at me in a creepy way or something. But I really couldn't tell. I showed the text to Kenzie and we decided to leave. We had been there for a while, so we would have gone back anyways. So we left the bar and walked back to our hotel, which was maybe a 10-minute walk. On the way back, I was careful and looked behind us, but didn't notice anything unusual. There were some people walking along the sidewalk, but no way of knowing if it was suspicious or not, because it was a straight shot back to the hotel, and a decent number of other people were out walking. So we got back to the hotel and went up to our room. Then I was going to go to bed pretty soon. In the meantime, I was just sitting on my bed and scrolling through my phone. Probably like 15 minutes after getting back, suddenly somebody knocked on the door. I didn't want to get up and answer it. I had a feeling that it was the creep who was texting me. I checked my phone, but there were no new messages on it. Then whoever was there tried entering our room, but the door was locked. I then walked over to the door. By the time I got there, though, the person must have left because I didn't see anybody. I even opened up the door and looked around the hallway, but saw nothing. Then I went back inside. I was talking with Mackenzie for a little while about the whole ordeal. That's when I started getting texts again. First, they said, "You should have answered your door." Then they were telling me to come out of my room. This had gone too far in my mind, and I called the police. I told them that I thought I was being stalked, and somebody tried entering my hotel room. They said they would be there in about 5 minutes. So I waited a little while, and then I texted the person to come to my room and I would answer the door this time. They ended up coming back to the door and knocking on it again. I still didn't answer it, but the police arrived right after that. They met the guy in the hallway. After that, I came out of the room and I spoke with the police as well. The person the police found was in fact the same one who was texting me. It was a guy who I had never seen before. He looked pretty young, maybe in his 20s. The police did a bit of an investigation, and they found out that the guy had seen me and found out I was staying at this hotel. He must have followed me or something. He then apparently had a good friend who worked at the hotel. He asked his friend for my name and number, which he was able to look up, and then gave it to him. The friend ended up being fired for his actions. I'm not sure what would have happened if the police didn't get there when they did. I don't know what the guy was planning to do. I'm really glad that it all worked out though. This happened to me yesterday. I was attending a concert with my twin sister, who is 19, and my older sister, who is 24. The concert was in Los Angeles, California, at the Echoplex venue. To give some context about the location, Echoplex venue is located right by a place called Skid Row. This area is full of homeless people and drug addicts and is not in the best location. Since the concert was located in a bad area, my protective mom drove us there. She also brought a taser and pepper spray with her just in case something happened. I will later explain how this is relevant to the story. The concert was supposed to start at 7, and there were no assigned seats, just standing room only. So my sisters and I wanted to get there at least 3 hours before to wait in line so we could get the best spots to stand at. To describe the layout of the venue, the entrance of the venue was located in an alleyway. It was pretty evident that we were the first fans there. So we got there through the alley and pulled up to the entrance and asked one of the security guards where they wanted us to start the line. He told us that he wanted us to start the line on the sidewalk and pointed to the entrance of the alleyway. We made our way there, and we knew we would be waiting for a while, so we brought lawn chairs and set them up along the sidewalk. My mom, being street smart and overly protective, did not want to drop us off and leave, so she stayed in line and waited with my sisters and I. We were sitting along the small brick wall just outside of the alleyway. I turned to my left and there was a tattoo parlor with a table and chairs in the front. Half an hour passed and a handful of fans arrived to wait in line as well. Now remember, we're in California and the weather gets warm. We knew that smaller concert venues can get packed and create a lot of body heat, so my sisters and I were wearing jean shorts. This is also relevant to the story. After waiting a while, I looked towards my left where the tables were in front of the tattoo parlor. I noticed a short, heavy man wearing a hat, staring right where me and my sisters were sitting. It creeped me out a little bit, but I decided to try to ignore it. About 20 minutes later, a skinny man with black curly hair sat right next to the short guy with the hat. I noticed that the skinny man with curly hair was under the influence of drugs. The two men did not say anything to each other, but looked like they could be related. This made me more aware, and I turned to my sisters and warned them, saying, "Be careful with these two guys at the table. They seem suspicious." I tried looking forward to the concert, but I was terrified as I noticed that now the skinny man was starting to look at me from the table. He began to walk past the entrance of the alleyway and right past us a couple of times, and every time he passed by, I held my breath out of fear. Even the short guy with the hat would get up from his seat occasionally and stand right by us and was talking with someone on the phone. It became so evident that they both had their eye on us that we kept a close eye and remained cautious. We had 1 more hour before the doors of the venue opened when the skinny man walked right past us. He stopped and stood in front of my older sister. After he was done staring at her, he then moved on to me. He stood right in front of me and began rubbing his stomach and making the noise as if he was eating, and was directly staring at my legs. I was disgusted and felt violated. It was like he was eating me with his eyes, and I wanted to scream at him and cuss him out. But remember, my chair was against the wall, so I couldn't back up. I did not freeze out of fear, but my mind was racing. I was trying to think of what to do. Do I kick him? Do I get up? I know that people who are under the influence can be reactive to sudden movements, so I decided to stay still. It was like a scene from Jurassic Park, and I had to stay still so the T-Rex wouldn't attack me. My mom was standing right next to me and clutching the taser, ready to zap him. She kept telling him to stop looking at her and back up. This made me feel a little more safe, but what was alarming was he was still not leaving after my mom's multiple warnings. Finally, my mom yelled for security, and he quickly left and retreated to the tables in front of the tattoo parlor. That was not that far away from where the short man was still sitting. After going to the tables, he was still staring at me with a big smile. When I told my mom that he was still staring, she looked right at him, and his eyes changed from my direction to my mom's. His expression changed from smiling to now angry, and a look of hate towards my mom because she got in his way. If you're wondering why no one in line helped us, most of the people who were in line were females who were just as scared as we were. The males in line froze, and when we told security about it, they said they couldn't do anything. That was because the line was outside of the venue, and they're required to only protect the inside of the venue. The girls behind us in line told us that as the man retreated back to the table, he noticed that my mom turned her back for a second. When she was turning her back, she joked with us how she was ready to zap him. Not even 5 minutes after the incident, the short, chubby man with the hat asked one of the employees of the venue what time the event ended. After that, he left without the skinny man. This terrified me because he didn't know anyone who was going to the concert, and he didn't have a ticket, so why would he be asking that? I told my mom that I heard the short man ask the employee, and she told me that she would be waiting right outside the venue for us, and to text her before leaving. Finally, it was time for the concert to start, and the doors were open. As my sisters and I were walking through the alley to get to the doors, my mom later told me that the skinny man and short man were smiling, watching us walk in. We finally got inside the venue, and the thought and fear of the men stayed in the back of my head for a while. But eventually, I forgot about it and was able to enjoy my time at the concert. My mom texted my sister and told her that she called my uncle, who's a correctional officer. She told him what happened earlier, and he was upset and decided to make the 1-hour drive and wait right outside the venue for us with my mom. This made us feel a lot more safe. When the concert finally ended, we began to walk out of the venue, and I saw my mom and uncle waiting right outside. When I looked past them, I saw the same car the short, chubby man was in, right in the front, now filled with a lot of men in the back seat just waiting. My mom and uncle told us to walk in the other direction from the car, and so we did. Thankfully, we made it to the car safely and drove home. I don't know what the two men's exact intentions were, but all I know is it was not good. I'm just glad that we made it out safely. This happened to me back when I was a kid. I remember that one time I had to go to my older sister's concert. She played some kind of instrument, I don't even remember what, but I was probably about 7 years old, and I thought that going to her concerts were so boring. I would have to go to them several times a year. One of them I went to with my parents and grandparents as well. I sat there for what felt like hours listening to various music. The concert was taking place in a local high school. It was not the high school that I ended up attending, but one that was a few cities away. I remember that after the concert was over, everybody wanted to go out into the main area outside the auditorium. I believe that it was the cafeteria of the high school, but there were only a few tables set up. There were tons of people standing around and talking. All of the kids who performed and their families and friends were gathered around. After we located my sister, we were talking to her and some of her friends. In this time, I happened to spot one of my friends from school. He had an older sister who was in the concert as well. When I saw him, I walked over to say hi. Then we started walking around the school a little bit, just talking. This only lasted for about 5 minutes, and then his parents called him over to leave. At that point, I was more towards the front of the school, but still in the same large room. I started to walk back over to where my parents and sister had been. When I got over there, I no longer saw them though. I figured that they must have moved. I started to kind of walk around and look for them. The place was extremely crowded. When I was sort of on the side of the room and still walking, this guy approached me. He asked me if I was looking for my parents. The way he spoke made me think that he either knew my parents or knew who I was, but I had no clue as to who he was. And for some reason, I thought that he either worked for the school or was involved in the concert somehow. I don't remember why, if he was wearing something that looked official or if I just assumed. But I know that I thought that he did, and I told him yes. He then said to follow him, and I began to walk after the guy. I know that we went to the end of the room towards the front, and then he took a right. At that point, we both started walking down a very long hallway. The hallway was quiet, and nobody else was in there. I remember wondering why my parents went down there at first, and then my thoughts changed from wondering why my parents were there to wondering if my parents were there. I was starting to get suspicious of the guy. My parents had told me many times not to go places with strangers. When we were towards the end of the long hallway, I saw the end was an exit, and these exit doors appeared to lead out to a parking lot. I kind of slowed down and then stopped. I had a really bad feeling about it now. When I did that, the guy told me to hurry up. I still wasn't moving though. At that point, he stepped back and grabbed my hand and started to tug me in the direction. I was resisting and struggling to. I was small for my age, so I didn't have much strength compared to him. But the more he pulled on my arm, the more I tried to get away from him. I was starting to move in the wrong direction. The hallway that we were in was lined with lockers. I remember that I was right next to them as he was pulling on my arm. I just started kicking the lockers as hard as I could. I was making a really loud sound. The guy yelled at me to stop, but I didn't. He then tried to grab my other arm and almost pick me up. I was resisting and kept kicking on the lockers. I was making a super loud noise. Then someone else entered the hallway. It was probably somebody that heard the loud noises. When they did, they yelled at us asking what was going on. That's when the guy just bolted. He let go of me and then went out the side exit door. I then went running back towards the person at the end of the hallway. It was a woman who I did not know, but I went up to her and told her what had happened. She eventually helped me find my parents, and I remember she got to a phone and called the police as well. An officer came out to the school and talked to me, and they looked around for the guy, but he was long gone. And I don't know if he was ever found either. I'm just grateful for the woman, and I'm glad that I didn't get kidnapped that night. A few years back, I went to a concert with my best friend Paige. Paige and I were going to see one of our favorite bands perform live. We had planned to go almost a month in advance. The concert was at a location in the city, and quite a few other people were going as well. I remember that because it was downtown, parking was a little bit hard to come by. We found a really cheap lot, but the problem was that it was kind of far away from the venue. Parking close by was either not available or super expensive. We didn't mind walking at all, and we even got there pretty early. After we parked, I remember that we were going to go on the sidewalk, and this area was pretty quiet. There were not many other people around, but these two guys were sort of walking near us. We didn't make it more than 10 feet when they approached us and asked if we wanted them to take us closer. They said they could give us a ride. We said no thanks because we really weren't interested. I remember the guys kept asking if we were sure and said that they could do it for free, but we still said no. At that point, it seemed sort of sketchy. So eventually, they stopped talking to us and we continued to walk. It took maybe 20 minutes to walk to the concert, and when we got close, things were much busier. Then we went inside, and were at the concert for the next several hours. When the concert was done, it was now later at night, probably about 11 o'clock. We walked back the same way that we had got there, and at first the sidewalks were packed, but soon they got quieter and quieter. By the time we got within a couple of blocks of our car, there was almost nobody around at all. The area was also much darker, with less street lamps. Pretty soon though, the parking lot with Paige's car was in sight. It was a lot that was outside and fenced in, but not that secure. You could easily walk right over the fence. There was probably only about 10 cars in this parking lot now. Right when we made it into the parking lot and were entering, the same two guys were there. They once more approached us in the parking lot and asked us if we needed a ride. We said no, we drove, and pointed to the car that we took. I remember that the guys were still trying to get us to go in their car with them. We started walking away, and they followed us. I told them to leave us alone, but they did not. That's when Paige threatened to call the police. At this point, they finally backed off and acted like they had done nothing wrong. They were surprised that Paige would suggest such a thing. We got inside of her car and started to drive away. But right when we left the parking lot, we saw really bright headlights of a car behind us. It was the two guys who were trying to get us to go with them. When we left, they followed us out, and they followed us out of the city entirely as well. They kept flashing their brights on and off, which was really annoying. At first, Paige took a couple of random turns to try to lose them. Then she just started driving back. We weren't really sure what to do about it. After following us for probably 15 minutes though, they finally turned and left us alone. I'm not sure what those guys were trying to do. I'm really happy that they stopped following us though. I remember I had a really memorable experience several years ago. I was 18 at the time, and my little sister was 15. She went to a concert with friends, and my parents told me that I had to give her a ride home. The concert was in the city, and it was a little over 10 minutes away from where we lived. I'm not sure if it was Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift or what, but there was like 1 million people there. So I drove down to the city and ended up getting really lucky to find a parking spot on the side of the street. I parallel parked just a couple of blocks away from the concert venue. It was sometime at night, and I think the concert was supposed to be ending shortly, so I texted my sister and let her know where I was. Meanwhile, the street and sidewalks were pretty quiet. I was guessing it would be chaos after the concert, so I really hoped that my sister would leave right away. As I sat there, I turned my headlights off and then just went on my phone. Probably 10 minutes into this, I remember hearing footsteps outside of my car. I figured that it was just somebody walking down the sidewalk, but I looked up and saw a guy approaching from behind and go right up to my window. Then he knocked on it. I rolled the window down a little bit and asked the guy what he wanted. I was afraid that maybe he was a parking cop and was telling me that I couldn't be here or something. But the guy just asked me if I could get out and help him. I asked him what he needed help with, but he didn't say. He just told me that he would show me. This guy seemed sort of suspicious. I told him I couldn't because I was waiting for my sister and I had to pick her up. He kept asking me and I told him no again. At that point, the man actually walked away. He went towards the back of my car and then went up back on the sidewalk. But he didn't keep walking away any farther. He just stood around on the sidewalk only like 20 feet away from me. Then I watched him take out a cigarette and start smoking it. I kept waiting for my sister. Several minutes went by, and this guy was still just standing there. The more he was standing there was making me uncomfortable, like I just knew that he was going to approach me again. I would say another couple minutes after this, I got a text from my sister saying that she was leaving now. At around this same time, I saw the guy in my mirror starting to approach again. The guy walked up and then tried opening my back door to my car, which was locked. Then he came over to my window and started aggressively banging on it. I didn't roll it down this time. I could hear the man starting to yell at me to open the window and let him in. I ignored it entirely. The man continued and kept trying to get me to open my driver's door. He even started kicking at the door with his feet. Had he continued, he probably would have put some dents in the car, but at that point, I put it in drive and pulled away. I went down the street and went straight to the concert venue. It was a basketball arena, and I called my sister and then circled the stadium until she made it outside. I briefly pulled over when she was by me and she got in. Then I headed home. But unfortunately, because I was so close to the arena, traffic was really bad. We were in a standstill for a while. People were honking and stuff, and we were barely moving. After sitting in traffic for probably 20 minutes, we had made it a little ways and were almost out of downtown. In that time, I remember looking around and seeing the same guy. He was walking down a sidewalk. And the crazy thing is that right when I looked over, about a second later he looked over at me. Our eyes locked for just a moment and then he started walking over. I couldn't go anywhere because of the traffic. The guy walked off the sidewalk and into the road and right up to my window. Once again, he started banging on it and stuff. I started honking, and a bunch of other people were honking too. After like 10 seconds of this, he finally walked away again. Within 5 more minutes probably, we had made it back onto the highway and were out of traffic. Luckily, we made it back home okay, and my car had no noticeable damage. Looking back, I don't know what that guy's problem with me was. It's so crazy how he saw me again, and then went out into the street to attack my car. I've explored many abandoned buildings over the past 2 years, but the scariest was an abandoned mall I explored once with a friend. It was late at night, and it took some work to get into the shopping center as it was locked up tight. We had to get onto the roof of the mall by going through a multi-story parking ramp that was next to it, also abandoned. There was a 10-foot wall we found and piled random things and debris against the wall so that we could climb over. Once we were in the mall, we did some normal exploration, checking everything out. We had explored almost the entire mall when we went downstairs to the ground floor for the last parts of it. As we walked around, we heard the sound of a radio and saw a light coming from an office. We thought it might be security, so we walked back up to where we had come in on the roof, ready to leave. As we were walking onto the roof, my friend suddenly stopped in our tracks and said that there was a guy blocking our exit up ahead. This guy was wearing all black and had no security badge on, and he hadn't seen us yet. We decided to hide for a bit, waiting for him to leave, thinking he was another explorer just smoking a cigarette or something. However, when we'd come back from our hiding spot a bit later, thinking he was gone by then, he was still there, this time holding a metal pipe. We instantly knew that something was going on here, since he looked at us as if he was guarding the entrance. It seemed like gang activity, and that they might be doing something or maybe hiding something in the building down on the first floor that they didn't want anyone to see. We went back down to the second floor and hid in a display window that was hidden from the rest of the floor. We were there for like 20 minutes at most, but it felt like years, heart pounding the whole time. We heard another man walking around our floor, dragging a piece of metal across the floor. My friend and I had no idea if maybe somebody had seen us walking around, or if they knew that we were in the building. But we didn't want to take any chances since these men looked sketchy. My friend remembered that there was another door on the roof that would bypass the guy guarding the other route and would take us straight into the parking ramp. We decided this was the best plan to get out without anybody noticing. We waited for the guy to leave our floor and decided to make a break for it to find the door. We couldn't rush or run as it would be easy to hear somebody running around in the abandoned mall, so we quietly sneaked around the back rooms until reaching the other door. We found our escape, but it was blocked by debris. We took a risk with the noise at this point and started pulling the debris away from the door, and my friend kicked the door open loudly. We sprinted across the roof, and I have no idea if anyone saw us because I was occupied in getting out there fast. We finally got into the parking ramp and made our way down to the bottom. There we saw there was another presumably gang member sitting in a blacked out Ford Transit van. The engine of the car was on, and I'm guessing the guy was in charge of guarding the entrance to the abandoned parking ramp. Whoever these people were, they clearly did not want anyone entering the abandoned mall. Maybe we just got caught in the mall at the wrong time, but we still weren't going to take any chances. At this point, our only option was to find a fire exit to the outside. The fire exit we found was screwed shut, so I basically launched myself through the door, which luckily flew open, and we got out and climbed down to the main road and onto the street. The only thing I can think of, being all coordinated as the guys were and how they were dressed, was gang activity. Once again, we had no idea if they originally knew that we were in the mall or not. Probably not, but we didn't want to take any chances with them, especially if they thought we saw something. That day has stuck with me as a scary moment in my life. I'm still exploring, but just being more careful with places I choose to explore. This happened one summer afternoon in 2018 when my partner, my stepdad, and I decided to check out an abandoned factory near my parents' house. We were just picking up my partner when we passed by it, and without thinking much about it, we started talking about exploring the place. My stepdad, who tends to act on impulse like us, pulled over right by the building and we decided to go for it. It didn't take long to find a way inside. The factory was falling apart with broken windows, walls crumbling down, and most of the roof was missing. The only real obstacle was a doorway that had some debris in front of it. We cleared that away, and as soon as we stepped through the door, something felt off. It was the middle of the summer, but the air inside the building was freezing cold. I don't mean it was a little chilly, it felt like winter. It wasn't even a damp kind of cold, like what you would expect from an abandoned building. And anyway, there was enough holes in the walls and roof that it shouldn't have been that cold. The inside was just as trashed as the outside. Piles of broken machinery, rusted metal, and old wooden beams lay scattered around. As we moved farther into the building, my partner and stepdad went ahead to check out another room, and I wandered off by myself to look through some cabinets that had been left behind. It was like everything had just been abandoned overnight. Files, worker IDs, and even older sheets from the late 90s and early 2000s were scattered everywhere. Most of the orders were packed and ready to be shipped, but none of them had ever been sent out. My stepdad pointed out how strange that was, and the factory looked like it had been closed for many decades, even though the most recent date I found was 2002. The building at most had been abandoned for 16 years. I have no expertise in something such as how quickly buildings decay, but the whole place seemed very run down for only 16 years. As we were talking about how weird the place was, I started feeling something else. It wasn't just the cold or the dust or the abandoned vibe. I was getting a feeling of danger, like something was watching us, or maybe waiting for us to leave. I can't describe it any better than that. It was like my fight or flight response kicked in, but I didn't know why. I told my partner and stepdad, and they agreed that we should head out. It was odd, and we hadn't heard anything or seen anything strange, but we all felt it. We made our way back to the car, and just as we were pulling away from the building, my partner and I both noticed something. In the doorway we had just come through, standing there, was a figure. It was hard to make out clearly. It kind of looked human, but not exactly. Something about it didn't sit right. It was like a person, but not. The figure didn't move, as it just stood there, staring at us. My stepdad didn't seem to notice since he was too busy driving. My partner and I looked at each other at the same time and asked if we had seen that thing in the door, so it was definitely not our imagination. We never went back to the factory. I can't shake the feeling whenever I drive past the building to my partner's house. I drive past the abandoned factory so often, and I wish I had never gone inside, because I think about it every time I drive by. About a 30-minute drive from where I live, this big retirement home building has been left abandoned since 2014. I don't know why it was abandoned, but I always thought it would be a cool place to explore. So finally, in 2020, when I was 16 years old, I went to the building with a few friends at night. When we arrived, we started looking around the outside of the building, shining our flashlights at the broken windows and stuff. Suddenly, one of my friends stopped in his steps and said, "I don't think it's a good idea to go inside now," and pointed out two reflecting dots in one of the windows. We still wanted to check out the building, but we decided to come back in the morning since it would be safer during the day. The next morning, when looking through the window where we saw what could have been a pair of eyes, we saw nothing at all that could reflect light. I found this a bit strange, but we were determined to get inside. We found a small open window that we could fit through and went in. It was quite a cool place. There was a lot of graffiti and stuff, and we decided to explore. Eventually, we walked next to the room where we saw the reflecting lights the previous night and looked around in it but found nothing. Just a weird bathroom with writing all over the walls in red marker. I found it kind of creepy, but there was graffiti everywhere, so we thought nothing of it. Everything was going smoothly until we were on the highest floor of the building. We were casually walking around through the hallway when one of my friends and I heard voices coming from the floor below us where we had just come from. My friend and I forced the other friends in our group to be quiet, and we all heard some voices that sounded like it came from about 2 or 3 men. We wanted to leave as soon as possible, but the building was designed so that we had to walk down the stairs next to the voices we heard out in the hallway that would lead us to an exit. So we finally walked slowly and silently down the first set of stairs. When we went down in that hallway, we heard voices coming from the room where we had seen the pair of eyes reflecting at night. Once we passed by that room, we sprinted through the rest of the hallway and exited the building. While walking away, we looked back at the room from the outside and saw an old scruffy-looking man waving at us. I didn't go back for a while, but eventually, a new friend I made really wanted to go there, so I reluctantly went with him because I knew the layout of the building, and so they wouldn't have to go alone. So I was back inside the abandoned building again, this time at night. We explored, and after about half an hour we went into the basement and sat down somewhere to smoke. Right when we lit our cigarettes, we heard footsteps above us, and we stayed still from fear because we had just been there talking in the hallway pretty loudly. My first thought was that it was likely the weird scruffy man from last time, because another explorer would have said something to us. The footsteps became louder and closer, but we could not go anywhere because this person was blocking our exit, so we stayed still for what felt like hours. The person just stood at the end of the dark hallway. We eventually saw some light going up and down the hallway after the footsteps went back upstairs. We waited about 5 to 10 minutes before bolting out of there and going into the forest nearby. We didn't talk about it for a month, until I saw on the news that they found someone living in the abandoned building. When police came to arrest him, he started throwing Molotov cocktails at them, so he ended up getting shot and died later in the hospital. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we ever got too close to that man in the multiple times that I explored the building. This happened just a few days ago, and it still terrifies me so much that I can't help but look over my shoulder whenever I'm alone in a room. I work in construction, and I mostly work from the office, but this day we were going out into the field. My team is made up of a few guys and one girl, Jane, who happens to be one of my good friends. A few days ago, we got the chance to check out a building before it was demolished. The place was huge, and we were given strict instructions of no cell phones, no pictures, and no distractions. We had walkie-talkies to communicate, but that was it. We all had safety gear on, including steel-toe boots, hard hats, safety vests, and gloves. My boss and the safety manager were going towards the top of the building doing their technical work, and they gave us the green light to explore a bit. So Jane and I, along with a few guys, went down to the lower floor to mess around a little, away from the bosses. The place was full of old furniture, tubes, pipes, and other random stuff. It used to be an office building. We were goofing off like typical young people would, having a laugh and messing around. Long story short, one of the guys, Brian, got a bloody nose during some silly roughhousing. Jane and I took him into the bathroom to clean up before we had to report back to our boss upstairs. We shoved a bunch of paper towels up his nose, and we used the sink to rinse him off since the water in the building hadn't been shut off yet. While we were trying to get him sorted, there was a knock on the bathroom door. I shouted out, "Very funny," thinking it was one of my other coworkers playing a prank. I went to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The door was jammed. I began shouting to let us out, thinking that it was my other coworkers still holding us in the bathroom as a prank. I was still tugging on the door when suddenly all the bathroom stall doors slammed shut. It wasn't like a gentle close. Each one slammed so hard they bounced off their stops. The lights went out immediately after that, making it totally pitch black. I don't know who screamed first, but we were all screaming at that point. Brian was cursing like crazy. I started clawing at the door, yelling to let us out. The bathroom had no windows, so it was dark as a cave in there. I could barely see my own hand in front of my face. It was also really cold in the bathroom now too. The most terrifying feeling I've ever felt was when something touched me in the pitch black bathroom. I felt a sticky hand crawling up the back of my hard hat. It wasn't a tap or a brush on my neck. The hand was climbing up slowly and deliberately. I yanked my hard hat off, and it hit the floor with a loud clatter, making the sensation stop. Finally, there was a huge bang as our coworkers from outside were able to get the door open, letting us out of that nightmare. We were all yelling at each other, trying to explain what had happened, but no one was making sense. I was shaking so badly that I could hardly stand. My boss checked the bathroom later, and all he saw was the blood in the sink from the nosebleed, but nothing else. He just gave me my hard hat back, and we all left the building as fast as we could. Once we were out of the building and calmed down a bit, the three of us who were trapped inside the bathroom heard the others' version of the story. They were still walking around just exploring stuff when they thought they saw a figure run across a gap in between two cubicles. Very soon after that, the lights began flickering on and off, and that was when they heard the loud bang on the stall doors coming from the bathroom and heard us start to scream. They were not holding us in as a joke, and they weren't anywhere near the bathroom by the time the three of us inside had started screaming. They eventually were able to pry open the door with a metal pipe, and one of the guys who had pried at the door said he also felt the sensation of a sticky hand slowly going up his arm briefly. Because this happened so recently, I'm still kind of a wreck since it happened, and I'm scared to go to the bathroom alone now, even at home. I always have my dogs come in with me. I don't know what happened in that bathroom, but I don't ever want to be anywhere near that building again, and I'm glad it's going to be demolished soon. This story happened to my cousin and I in 2018. We both love photography and taking long drives listening to music, so that's exactly what we did on this particular day. We drove about an hour north to a small town and found an abandoned barn that was also for sale. At the time, we didn't spot any trespassing signs, so we decided to be adventurous and go check it out. The barn was in semi-decent condition, although the paint had begun to peel off. Structurally, it was pretty sound though, and I didn't feel uneasy about going in. I'm an avid urban explorer and have been in far worse buildings, so we went inside. Once we got inside, we somehow ended up in the basement of this barn. I immediately was getting some weird vibes from the stuff that was in that barn. There was little girls' clothes, toys, and furniture littered throughout the basement of this barn. My cousin and I both thought it was creepy. Behind the barn was a big cornfield that came up right to the back of the barn, so we decided to get some cool photos of the barn with corn stalks in the frame of view. I snapped a few shots of my cousin, and we were ready to head back to the car. Walking through the first row of corn on my way back to my cousin's car, I saw a bone sticking up from out of the dirt. It was a vertebrae bone. At this point, I stopped dead in my tracks in disbelief. I was wondering if it was what I thought it was or if it was an animal bone of some kind. I started looking around and there were several more bones. They were too big to be a deer. I yelled at my cousin, who was almost back to the car, to have her look. We both started examining and digging around the dirt, and we kept finding more and more bones. In college, I took a cadaver lab in human anatomy, so I'm very familiar with the human body. We found a fibula and fully intact femur. That's when I really started to freak out. We decided to call the cops because we knew this was serious. We waited in the car until they arrived. Once the pair of cops arrived, we all started looking through the corn and a nearby trash pile. The cops I don't think believed us, and I distinctly remember them saying they thought it was a deer carcass. That was until I found a full rib cage in the trash pile and showed it to them. The cops told us that they would need to leave and they were calling a full forensic team out to start collecting evidence. We left totally shaken up. On the way out, I did see a no trespassing sign which we missed on the way in. I don't know if the cops saw the no trespassing sign, but if they did, they didn't bring it up at all and didn't care. We gave the cops our information, but we never heard anything more from them. I also watched the news closely for the next few weeks and didn't see anything. I wish I could have got the full story of what happened. It was like an episode of Law & Order, and it was definitely one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced. Something really crazy happened last year. It was a weekend, and I went out to a couple of bars with some friends. We were in the city and started the night at a restaurant before going to one bar and then another. Each place that we went was very busy with it being a weekend. People were pretty much everywhere. The last bar of the night that we were at, we arrived at probably about 11 o'clock or so. I was with my friends hanging out and drinking. After being there for about an hour or so, I remember that I was standing kind of near the bar and my friends. That's when a man approached me from the side. He came right up to me and said that he had to talk to me. The guy seemed angry, but I didn't know why. I asked him what was up. Instead of talking to me though, the guy actually shoved me. I was really confused. The guy didn't seem like just some random angry drunk shoving me for no reason. He seemed to have a legitimate problem with me. I asked him what his problem was, but the guy just started cursing at me and walking towards me again. This time, I wanted to fight him, and I took a step towards him. However, my friends saw this and stepped in. They stopped the man and me from reaching each other. The man ended up turning around and walking away to another part of the bar. My friends asked me what that was all about, and I told them that I had no idea. I did not know who the man was or why he was seemingly so angry at me. He had said he needed to talk to me, but apparently he just wanted to fight for some reason. I looked around but no longer saw the man and figured that he left. So I went back to hanging out with my friends near the bar area. Another hour or so went by, and we still didn't see the man or anything. We then decided to leave. My friends and I walked out of the bar, and we sort of split up at that point. There were 5 of us, and 3 of my friends took an Uber together. My other friend walked back to his apartment downtown because it was pretty close by. I lived the other direction, so I was going to get a different Uber. After leaving the bar, I waited with my friends for them to get their Uber, and then I ordered one as well. Theirs came before mine, and when they left, I noticed that the guy who tried to fight me earlier was outside. He was standing on the sidewalk to the left of me, about 50 feet away. I'm not sure if he had been there and I hadn't noticed because of my friends, or if he had just got there. Either way, he was here now, and just after I noticed him, he started walking over to me. I didn't want to fight this guy, and I just wanted to go home. So I turned and started walking away. After a few moments, I looked back and saw the guy walking after me, and he was walking extremely fast. So then I just started to run. I took off and sprinted down the sidewalk away from him. He started to run after me. However, I was much faster than him, it appeared. I continued to run, and I soon made it several blocks away. I could barely see the guy. I turned again and kept running until I lost him completely. Then I finally stopped, caught my breath, and called another ride home. I wouldn't be able to take the other Uber that I had ordered previously. I was left extremely confused about the whole thing, and I'm still confused. I think that maybe the guy got me confused with somebody else, and he must have been really mad at this person, whoever he thought I was, because I can't really think of any reason why he would be angry at me.
This is something that happened back when I was in college. I was a senior at the university, and like most college kids, my friends and I liked to go out to the bars on weekends. I lived in a house with 3 other girls, and we were all good friends. On one particular weekend, I had a lot of studying to do, and I was not going to be going out, but all 3 of my roommates were. They really wanted me to go, but I just had a lot to do, and I told them that I would go out with them the next weekend. So they left without me, and they met some of our other friends at one of the many bars just off of campus. I was upstairs in my bedroom studying, and I knew that I would be up late anyways with my work, so I had told my friends that if they needed rides, I would be able to drive them. As the night went on, I got a Snapchat from my roommate Ashley at probably about 10 o'clock. She said that there was some creepy guy following her around the bar. I asked her if she wanted to leave, and she said that she did not want to go yet, so I kept working. I didn't hear from her for several more hours, but a little after midnight, she called me. I picked up the phone, and right away Ashley seemed to be a little bit drunk. However, she said that they were at a different bar now, and the same man was still following her around. She said that he was really creepy, and asked if I could give her a ride home now. I said yes, and then we hung up, and I left to go to the bar. It was maybe a 5-minute drive, and was pretty close by. The bar that Ashley was at now was in downtown of the small city our college was located in. I parked my car on the side of the road up the street, and then went inside the bar. It was very busy with it being a weekend and stuff. I looked around trying to find my friends. I saw some people that I knew, but not the specific friends that I was looking for. But after making my way in a little bit, I was finally able to see one of my roommates. However, it wasn't Ashley. This was Molly, and I asked her if she knew where Ashley was. Molly said that Ashley had left. She also mentioned that some creepy guy kept staring at her and stuff. I asked her if she knew where Ashley had gone, but she said no. So I then tried calling Ashley, but she didn't pick up the phone. I was a little bit worried, because I didn't know where she was, especially with the fact that some creepy guy seemed to be following her around. I tried calling her again, as well as texting her, but she didn't respond right away. So I left the bar to try to look for her. I thought that maybe she went to another bar that we would go to sometimes. There were about 4 or 5 that we often went to in the city, but I really didn't know. I left the bar and then walked down the sidewalk at first, and I didn't see her. There were not many people out on the sidewalks, so I started walking down one just looking around. I tried calling her again, but she still didn't answer. I remember that I turned a corner and started going down another sidewalk. I was walking very quickly and going towards another bar, but I was also going in the direction of where we lived. There was also a slim chance that maybe she tried walking back home. It would take probably 30 or 40 minutes to walk back to our house, but it was possible. So after going about another block in that direction, I actually saw her. She was way up ahead,
and I noticed that walking behind her a ways was a man. I went faster, and I basically started jogging. When I got within a close enough distance, I started yelling her name. She heard it and turned around. When she did, the man stopped and turned around as well. After that, he started walking down a different street. I ran over to Ashley and I told her that I would give her a ride. We started walking back to my car. On the way back, though, the man returned. He started trailing us, sort of a far ways back, but was still there. Ashley said that he had been following her all night to multiple different bars. We walked quickly and were able to make it back to the street my car was on. After getting inside, I drove Ashley home, and then I went back to pick everybody else up and give them a ride. Ashley said that her phone had died, so she left the bar to walk home because she couldn't contact anyone. I'm really glad that I was able to find her. The guy seemed really determined to follow her wherever she went. I'm not sure what would have happened if Ashley had tried to walk the whole way home. I'm a female, and I used to work at a bar as a bartender several years ago. I did it for about a year, and I worked at a place that would often get really busy. There were a lot of regulars that would come in as well. I got to know some of the usual customers, and overall, I enjoyed the job. Towards the end of my time working there, an event took place though that ultimately made me quit. It all started a few weeks prior to the event. Like I mentioned before, after working there for a while, I picked up on many regular customers. I would recognize faces and talk to some of the customers that would sit at the bar. There was one guy that I noticed who would come in a lot. I'm not sure of the first time that he was there, but I know that he started coming in very frequently. He didn't say anything to me the first few times. I know that because I remember asking him what he wanted, but he just shook his head. He was never with anybody else, so he would just sit at the end of the bar by himself. I also started to notice that he was often just staring at me. This was not a big deal until after noticing him several times over the course of a few weeks, and he did start talking to me. He started to sort of hit on me in a pretty creepy way. I was not too bothered though, but we started getting complaints from other customers as well. Apparently, he had made some other people in the bar uncomfortable several times by staring at them or talking to them and apparently saying creepy things. I know that he got asked to leave the bar at least once, maybe twice, and he did leave, so I figured that he was just a creepy guy. One night, he came in again and was sitting at the end of the bar. I noticed him staring at me once more, but this time, he waved me over. I walked over to him, and I just remember him asking me to come over to his place when I got off or something like that. I said no, and when the guy cursed at me after that, I told him to leave. He got up and left the bar at that point. Then I went back to work. That did not seem like a very unusual event given the guy's track record. I remember even thinking that we should probably ban the guy or something. He rarely, if ever, bought anything, and he only seemed to cause problems. But for the rest of my shift, I didn't see him. I got off later that night when we closed. After leaving the bar, I was able to walk home from work, so I started going back. I had an apartment just a few blocks away, and it would take me maybe about 10 minutes. Things were very quiet now, and when I got back to my apartment building, I went up to the second floor where my place was. However, when I entered my hallway, I saw the man from the bar standing right in front of my door. I noticed him about the same time that he saw me. We both looked at each other, and my first reaction was to turn around and go back. I saw the man starting to walk after me. I quickly went to the stairs and went down them to the first floor as fast as I could. By this point, I was running, and after going downstairs, I sprinted right out of the building. When I got outside, though, I realized that the man did not follow me out. I felt better, but I also realized that he was probably just going to stay in front of my apartment door, knowing that I would have to return because I lived there. I did not know how this guy even knew where I lived. I started walking down the sidewalk back towards the bar. It was closed now, but I wasn't really sure where else to go. After calming down though and coming to my senses, I called the police and told them about what happened. They said they would send an officer to come to my apartment. So I walked around the quiet streets waiting for a while. When the police officer got there, we went into my apartment building. After getting to my floor, we saw that the man was still there. When he noticed us though, he started walking away. The officer told him to stop, and the guy did. I remember the guy telling the police officer that he was trying to go to his friend's. He claimed that it was an honest mistake and he must have been at the wrong door. But when he was asked what his friend's name was, he said he couldn't remember. The guy ended up getting told that he had to leave and not come back, so he did. I was then able to get inside of my apartment, but I was really worried that the man would return. He must have followed me home without me knowing at one point. I don't know how else he would have known my address. The next time I was at work, I told my boss about it, and he agreed to ban the guy from the bar. Apparently, he came in one time that I was not working, and they banned him. So luckily for me, I did not see him for the rest of the time that I worked there. Still, I decided to get another job a short time later. I also moved out of my apartment when the lease was up, and moved to a different one. So hopefully, I never see that creepy guy again. This happened last fall. I went to a local bar to watch a football game with my friend Garrett. There was a big game that we wanted to see, and I went to the bar and met him there. The bar was very crowded with lots of other people, probably there to watch the game as well. We were luckily able to get an open place to sit at a table. Garrett and I ordered some food, and we were watching the game and talking. I remember that my wallet fell out of my pocket at one point, so I put it on the table. And we were at this round table, and Garrett and I had positioned our chairs to get a good view of the game. So because of this, I wasn't really paying the greatest attention to my wallet. And in the crowded bar, a guy came up and tried to steal it. Luckily, I noticed just in time. The guy, who was kind of skinny but had a lot of tattoos, came over, and I sensed him just standing next to our table. When I turned around, I saw him holding my wallet. After noticing me, he dropped it, and the guy quickly walked away. I knew that he didn't work there or anything, and he didn't offer any kind of explanation. I yelled at him asking what he was doing, but he didn't answer and just kept going away. The guy quickly disappeared into the crowd of people standing around by the bar. I put my wallet back in my pocket and made sure that it wouldn't fall out. The guy must have seen my wallet sitting there and that Garrett and I were facing the other direction. Still, I could tell that he was standing near us before he tried to take it. A little while later though, maybe 30 minutes or so, the guy came back. He was just standing around by us again. I looked over and saw him just by our table. I asked him what he wanted. The guy just gave me a dirty look and then sort of walked away. He was definitely very suspicious. A while after that, I did notice the guy standing a ways away and looking at me. He was still giving me a dirty look. I did my best to just ignore him after that. Although if he did decide to come back over to us, I was going to give him a piece of my mind, but he didn't. A while later, the game ended, and many of the people started to leave the bar. Garrett and I were going to leave and go our separate ways. We walked out, and there was the parking lot for the bar to the side of it. When we walked out there, I noticed the same guy again. He was standing right outside of my car next to it. When Garrett and I saw him, we had a bad feeling. I didn't know what this guy's plans were. I was parked kind of in the back corner of the parking lot, and I just didn't want to go near the guy. Instead, I went to Garrett's car with him. I sat inside Garrett's car and we talked about the situation. We were hoping that the man would just leave, and from where we were, we could not see my vehicle. So eventually, I decided that I would just go walk over and ask the guy to leave if he was still there. If he chose to try to fight me or something, then whatever. So I got out of Garrett's car and walked over to mine. When I did not see the guy. It seemed as though he had actually left. I went to my driver's door and started to open it. That's when I just heard the sound of somebody approaching. I quickly shut the door and locked it, and then saw the man arrive at my driver's window. He tried opening my door and entering my car, and when it wouldn't open, he started banging on the windows. I quickly backed out and then left, leaving him standing in the parking lot. I went home and called Garrett and told him all about it. That was one of my craziest bar moments for sure. I don't know who that guy even was, and I don't know why he kept messing with me. I'm a former bartender. I used to be one of the main bartenders at this smaller place on a corner. It was at the edge of the city, and I really enjoyed working there. The bar was pretty cool and had lots of fun pictures on the wall and stuff. So one night, I was all by myself. It was a quiet night, and we had just got a few people. As it got later, I was the only person inside the entire bar. But then, a man soon entered. He was wearing this mask over his head. It was either of a celebrity who I didn't know or just a random person, but I didn't recognize it, and it was basically a full fake head mask. This was a creepy enough sight with it not being any time near Halloween, and the man walking in alone. The guy didn't say anything, and walked up to one of the stools at the bar. I went over to him and asked what he would like to drink. The guy did not respond to me. I asked him what's up with the mask. He still didn't say anything back to me. I was confused about it and also kind of creeped out as well. After some awkward silence, the man just got up and walked out of the bar just like that. I'm not going to lie, I was glad that he was gone, but I was still wondering what on earth that was all about. The bar was quiet for a little while until a group of people came in. It was about 5 or 6 people who seemed to all be in a friend group. They came in and sat down together at the bar and ordered some drinks. The group was very nice and friendly, and as I was getting them drinks, we were all talking and stuff. Sometime as I was getting them drinks and stuff, I remember I looked up and the masked man was back. He must have entered when I was making a drink or something, because I hadn't noticed him coming in. He sat at the far end of the bar now. Once again, I had a bad feeling about him being here. The others at the bar noticed him too, but didn't say anything. Then the guy randomly got up and walked out again. The whole thing was pretty strange. The group of friends stayed for a while longer and then all left. After them, we didn't get any more customers for the night. A while after that, it was time for closing, so I got up and locked the doors. I went to do some final things before I would leave for the night. I was turning off lights from signs and stuff and doing a little cleaning. During this time, the masked man returned again. He did not come inside, but he tried to. When he couldn't get in the building, he just stood there, looking at me through the window. I did my best to ignore him, and I went out of his sight for a while. When I came back, he was finally gone. When I left that night, I was worried that I would see him again, but luckily I didn't. I was able to make it back home okay. And after that, I never saw the guy again. It was really weird though, and I still wonder about it sometimes. In my early childhood, I would spend nearly every day riding my bike. It was a normal summer afternoon when I went out with my friend once when I was 8 years old. We pedaled around the neighborhood racing each other and stopping for snacks. After a couple of hours, my friend had to go home. I still had some time, so I decided to ride on my own. I took a route that went through a quiet area where the trees lined the streets and the houses were spaced apart. It felt peaceful at first, but soon I noticed a white Volkswagen not far behind me. I didn't think much of it initially. Cars passed by all the time, and I figured it was just another driver out for a leisurely afternoon. But as I continued, I realized that the car was following me. I took a left turn, then a right, trying to shake it off, but the Volkswagen stayed close. I remembered what my dad had taught me about safety and what to do if I felt threatened. I pushed my bike harder, trying to distance myself from the car. Then it stopped beside me. A man stepped out. He was hairy with a scruffy beard and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in days. He smelled really bad, but I remembered that I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't cover my nose. He stood a bit away from me on the curb and crouched down to my level height and asked if I was okay. I nodded, saying I was fine and just biking, keeping my eyes on him, trying to gauge his intentions. The man went on to say that he was a friend of my parents, and they had told him to find me and drive me to my grandma's house. My grandma had been dead for 5 years now, and I knew that he wasn't who he said he was. I'm not sure if I would have believed him anyways at that age, because I didn't think my parents could possibly be friends with someone who smelled that bad. I called him a liar and then started pedaling again as hard as I could. As I started leaving, the man reached out to try to grab my arm, but I had already put enough distance from him to avoid his grasp. I rode straight home, not checking to see if the car was following me still or not. The only thing I could think about was the man and what could have happened if I hadn't escaped. When I finally burst through the front door, my parents were in the living room. I was shaking and crying as I told them everything. My parents called the police, describing the type of car that I had described. Miraculously, on their way to my house, they passed the white car that had been following me and arrested the smelly guy who was driving. Then they arrived at my house, and after my verification that that was the guy that tried to grab me, the police left with the man. I had no idea what ended up happening to him and what his consequence was. I think my parents knew, but since I was pretty young, they told me to not worry about it and that I would be safe. It was scary when it happened, but looking back, it felt good that the guy had ended up being caught. One summer evening when I was about 9 or 10, a serious accident happened just a couple of blocks from our farmhouse. We weren't home when it occurred, but had heard about it from our neighbors. The next day, curiosity got the best of me, so I asked my mom if I could ride my bike up to the corner where the accident took place. I wanted to check out the area to see if I could see anything that had been left over, and I was also just bored. My mom said yes, but warned me not to go any further. She was hanging laundry on the clothesline outside and kept an eye on me as I pedaled away. Our area was rural and quiet. My brother and I rode our bikes everywhere and always felt safe. When I got to the corner, I hopped off my bike and began to look around at the scattered debris. There were bits of broken glass and a crumpled piece of metal. I didn't know much about cars, but it was fun to look at for some reason. As I poked through the leftover wreckage, I heard a car approaching. It was a dark blue station wagon. The two men inside looked older, maybe in their 40s. I felt uneasy immediately, and then they rolled down the window and called out to me. They asked me which one of them was cuter. I jumped back on my bike, pedaling as fast as I could back to my house, which was less than half a mile away. I glanced over my shoulder and saw them turning the car around to follow me. As I biked down the road, I screamed at the top of my lungs, hoping my mom would hear. Thankfully, she had heard me and was running toward me, her face a mix of confusion and concern. The station wagon was close behind still, but as we neared our driveway, the men hesitated. They must have seen my mom coming closer, because they slammed on the brakes and turned their car back down the gravel road, heading away from us. I didn't stop pedaling until I reached my mom. When I explained, she was understandably shaken. She called the police, who came to get information, but there wasn't much they could do. I told them what I remembered about the car and the men's faces, but there wasn't too much to go off of, so I don't think they ever found them. It was scary that something so dangerous could happen so close to my house, where I had always felt very safe. I live in a busy city and would often ride my bike to get places so that I wouldn't have to deal with traffic, and I just enjoy biking. I had a heavy single-speed bike that was perfect for short trips, but would always be a workout when going up hills. One evening, I decided to ride to the grocery store. My route took me through a park, one that I had biked through before and knew well. As I pedaled along the dirt path that ran around the perimeter of the park, I found myself struggling up a hill. The weight of the bike felt particularly burdensome, and I could hear the sound of someone jogging behind me. The rhythmic thud of feet hitting the ground was unmistakable, and it grew louder as they gained on me. Feeling embarrassed by my slow pace, I decided to let the jogger pass. I veered to the right, expecting them to zip by, but they didn't. I kept pedaling, trying to speed up, but the sound of their footsteps stayed right behind me. I didn't want to risk looking behind me while biking up the hill, in fear of hitting a rut or rock in the dirt path. I even slowed down a ton, just waiting for them to pass, but they never did. Finally, I pulled off the path and into the grass, ready to turn around and give whoever it was a piece of my mind. But when I turned, I was met with nothing but empty trail. No jogger and no more footsteps, just silence. I looked around, scanning the park for any sign of movement, but there was none. The jogger had vanished. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I was baffled because I was certain I had heard someone right behind me. After a few minutes of standing there, I finally hopped back on my bike and continued to the grocery store. That night, back at home, I started to look up more about the park that I was biking through. Apparently, the park had been built over a cemetery, primarily for the poor. They had moved some bodies, but not all. Estimates suggested there were still around 2,000 remains buried underneath the park. I even found stories from people who claimed to have seen apparitions or felt cold spots while walking through the park at night. It seemed to make sense now that if the park was haunted, that it had something to do with my experience while biking through it earlier that day. I still bike through that park fairly often, but haven't had anything strange happen to me again, although I try to avoid it at night. When I was younger, I would go on many cycling trips. The year after I graduated college, I embarked on a long-distance cycling trip across Australia. I'd cycled through many places and had some strange experiences, but one night stands out in my memory from when I was in Australia. I had been riding for weeks in Western and Southern Australia. Most of my journey was uneventful, filled with the sounds of nature and the rhythm of my bike tires against the dirt roads. On this particular evening, I found myself cycling alongside a pipeline that hugged the highway. As dusk approached, I decided to find a quiet spot to camp. I veered off the dirt road, moving inland. The deeper I went, the more I felt I was leaving civilization behind. I stumbled upon what looked like a small forest, with overgrown ruins peeking through the trees. Stone walls were jutted out from the ground, remnants of houses that had been there long ago. It felt eerie, but also interesting, as if nature had taken the land back from the past. I decided this was a nice spot, so I stopped and set up my tent, ensuring that the area was clear of brush and debris. After a simple pasta dinner, I snuffed out the fire and crawled into my tent. By then, it was around 8 p.m., and darkness had enveloped the forest quickly. I had grown accustomed to camping alone, and nights spent outdoors were nothing new to me. But that night was different. The first thing I noticed was an unsettling silence. Normally, the forest is full of sounds, whether they're comforting or intimidating, but it was dead silent. I lay in my sleeping bag, straining to hear any sound such as crickets, animals, or anything, but there was nothing. Eventually, I heard loud and deliberate footsteps though. I speculated that it was a person. I couldn't think of an animal that made such a distinct walking sound that I knew of. I held my breath, hoping whatever it was wouldn't notice my presence. The intervals between the steps were oddly spaced, like someone was taking their time. I debated between grabbing my torch and confronting whatever was out there, or just sitting in silence. Moments dragged on, filled only by those ominous steps circling my tent. The footsteps continued for most of the night, sometimes fading into the distance, only to circle back. I must have sat there for what felt like hours, gripping my shovel tightly in case I needed to use it. Eventually, exhaustion took over. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, the sun was peeking through the trees, casting light into the tent. Outside, the forest was alive now with sounds I had missed earlier that night, such as birds chirping and leaves rustling in the breeze. I quickly scanned the area for any signs of what happened during the night, but there was nothing. No tracks, no broken branches, no indication that something had circled my tent. It was as if the forest had returned to its natural state, erasing any evidence of the previous night's terror. I hurriedly packed up my gear, shaken but relieved to be moving again. As I cycled back towards the pipeline and the highway, I couldn't shake off the strange feeling of whatever had happened the night before, certain that it wasn't just my imagination. I love riding my bike at night, and would often go for night rides on this trail near my house. I had been on this trail many times, and never saw anything strange until this one night. As I was riding, the beam from my bike light sliced through the shadows, illuminating the narrow path ahead. I was biking fast, and as I rounded a bend, something caught my eye. Off to the right of the path, just beyond the tree line, stood a figure. Since I was going pretty fast, it was only visible in my headlight for a split second, but it was a person, their outline barely visible in the darkness. They seemed to just be standing there, motionless. I flew by and questioned if my eyes were playing tricks on me and if I had really seen someone just standing there in the woods. I was a little bit nervous because the trail I was on was just one big loop, with the entrance and exit being the same path. So on my way back out, I would pass by that spot again. As I finished the loop and got back onto the path where I had seen the figure, I was nervous about seeing it again. I didn't even want to see it, and I kept my eyes on the path right in front of me, not daring to look out into the woods when I approached the spot. But I couldn't avoid seeing it this time. In the middle of the trail stood the same figure. This time I could make out a bit more detail. It looked like a man, though it was hard to tell in the dark. He stood there, legs apart, blocking my path. I slowed down, unsure of what to do, but this was the only way out. I had to pass him. I yelled at him to get out of my way, but there was no response. I pushed down on the pedals, hoping to dart past him somehow, but as I got closer, he suddenly lunged towards me. My heart sank as I realized he was trying to push me off my bike. I swerved to the left, almost hitting the trees on the left side of the path. As he tried to grab me or knock me off, I kicked my right leg into him, trying to kick him and push him back away from my bike. I don't know if it was his shoulder or arm, but part of his body made contact with my upper body as he tried to shove me off the trail and off my bike. I'm not even sure how, maybe just crazy adrenaline, but I had managed to stay upright on my bike through all this and not hit the trees on my left as I squeezed past him. I pedaled hard, pumping my legs as fast as I could all the way back home. That night, I warned the authorities about the guy on the path and hoped that maybe he would still be there when they arrived, but I doubted it. I'm not sure if he was trying to mug me or maybe he wanted to steal my bike, but either way, he was crazy enough to try to attack me on foot while I was biking. I still bike that trail all the time, but I always have a firearm with me now just in case.